Alrighty, I think everything is set up properly. I always say I think everything's set up properly as if I haven't done this like 100 times at this point. Let me just get my tabs in order really quickly again. And I think we're good to go. Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and today we're going to be doing another edition of Channel Members Ballot Banter. So if you're unaware of the way this works, basically if you're a channel member for this channel, specifically tier 2 and above, then you get to submit for ballot banters that I review live on this channel that we do every other month. We do general streams every month, but we do specifically ballot banter streams every other month. So, if you're interested in that, if you want to become a member, join, submit for future ballot banters, I would really appreciate that. I think someone joined right before this started. I think it was Vav. Thank you so much for becoming a member, Vav. I think we now have 55 members. I don't know if that's the most we've ever had, but I know we definitely have never had 60. So if we could get up to 60 members, that would actually be incredible. But either way, if you're interested in just listening to what I have to say about what the members have sent in, that's great. But of course, if you want to submit for future ballot banters, that's also great. So that's up to your discretion if you want, but there is the join button down below if that is the kind of thing that you're interested in. As far as anything else, yeah, so we're going back to the normal format of things. I know in the last stream we kind of had to do different stuff, like we couldn't have the music playing because I was actually watching videos on the stream. So as usual, just let me know if everything looks and sounds good before we get started. I really don't want another ballot banter stream where things are really, really bad. So we'll make sure of that. And as far as anything else, yeah, this is not meant to be like versus matchup review. It's not going to be as in-depth. My opinions aren't going to be as definitive as what I say in versus matchup review. A lot of this is meant to be just my general opinions, right? Or like my initial thoughts. As far as like these streams, yeah, it's my initial thoughts, and just making sure I say all of this right. The trade-off with that, though, of course, is that, again, you guarantee that your matchup gets on to the show, right? You guarantee that it gets shown off, it gets talked about, and all that good stuff. So that's kind of the trade-off there. So it's not as in-depth as versus matchup review, but you make sure it gets on. Additionally, as I've said before, I will try to be positive with these because, you are the guys paying for it, right? So I want to make sure that I'm generally positive about, I'm not going to shit on anybody's matchups or anything, but I also have to be honest, right? Because if I'm not honest with my thoughts on matchups, then what's really the point, So that's kind of my thought, that I will be positive. I'll try to keep everything like on a more positive note, but it has to be honest, or else what am I doing? I'm just shilling matchups that I don't believe in. Like, obviously I can't do that. We already have some super chats. Thank you guys so much. Let me heart those really quickly and I'll read them out. Of course, yes, super chats will make sure to be read. Good morning and happy Saturday, Raptor. Happy Saturday, Overlord. Thank you so much. I'm curious, who do you think are the 5 most overdue characters for Death Battle? Oh my god, personally I think it's Luffy, King Kong, Gandalf, Pac-Man, and Sailor Moon. Luffy I would definitely throw in there. Sailor Moon I feel like I would also throw in there. I feel like Star Trek as a whole is kind of overdue, so I guess I would say either Kirk or Spock. That would be one of my big ones. I might say Gandalf if Sauron hadn't already come onto the show, but Gandalf also does feel kind of overdue. And King Kong, similar to Godzilla, it's like, yeah, he does feel like he should get an episode as well. At least we have Godzilla, though, right? At least we have some monster representation. And Pac-Man also feels like a big one, too. So I would probably swap out one of those for Star Trek, and there might be some other character, like Spider-Man's overdue for a return, but that's not really the question. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of characters that feel very overdue. Spike Spiegel from Cowboy Bebop, I feel like there's a lot of different anime, like Inuyasha. I feel like there's a lot of different older anime that feel like they should get on at some point. So yeah, thank you so much for the super chat, though. That's probably my answer. As promised, here's my money. Thank you so much, Candy Sensei. I very much appreciate the very much appreciate that. Thank you so much. So as I've said, everything's sounding beautiful. Thank you so much, Apex. I appreciate that. So as long as everything sounds good, we're good. But yes, I will keep an eye on the chat. I will make sure to do that. But of course, the only messages that are guaranteed to be read or guaranteed to be seen are the super chats. If anyone super chats, I will make sure to read them. I will make sure to put more focus on them. But of course, I will keep an eye on the chat. But we do have to make sure we keep things moving. I do have a hard out today in about 3 hours. So not that I'll rush through anything, hopefully, but more so that we just have to make sure we keep things moving. So I'll keep an eye on the chat, but the super chats are what are guaranteed to be read. If anyone super chats or becomes a member or anything, I appreciate it so much, and I will make sure to give you you that appreciation. Speaking of which, Candy Sensei, thank you again. Luzan next, I scream as I get sent to the asylum. Luzan, I still think has some chance for this season, but of course I feel like that's not really something you're allowed to say anymore, because it just never happens, right? Like, for the last few years, it's been something where it's like, it feels like it's the most predictable. It feels like it's a predictable thing, so you keep predicting it, and it just doesn't work, right? So Luzan, maybe in the next 10 years, we'll see. For real though, I do think it still has somewhat of a chance for this year, but if it doesn't happen this year, then at this point I'm done predicting it, because it becomes clear at that point that Death Battle's not really that focused on having it happen in a timely fashion, you know? So if it's not this year, then who fucking knows? But anyway, I think with that all said, we're probably good to get going. We don't want the intro to take too long. Oh, Dr.Fiction, you became a member again! Thank you so much! Or did it expire or not? Either way, you're now a Velociraptor. Thank you so much, Fiction. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate it a lot. Again, you know, if we get up to 60 members sometime soon, that would be absolutely insane. So yeah, anyone who becomes a member, I appreciate it. Even if it's just the lowest tier, like the Microraptor tier, that would still be incredible. Because generally speaking, the more members that we get, the more that we can do. Like, we can add more emotes. We can generally just add more things and keep collecting to it, regardless of the tiers that people are, but it's more so the number of members that we have. Thank you so much, Alex Chen. I will get through these super chats and then we will get going. Thank you so much, Alex Chen, for the $20. That is incredible of you. I am pitching Knuckles versus Lucario to Liam and Sam on June 23rd. Okay, good luck with that. Knuckles and Lucario are two of my favorite characters, and they have a surprising amount of connections. So I'm excited to pitch this. I'm not sure if I've heard that one before. I've heard Knuckles versus Meta Knight get a little more attention. I'm not sure if I've heard Knuckles versus Lucario, though. I get it's another Sonic versus Pokemon matchup. I feel like there are a decent amount of those you can make, you know, decent connections. Obviously, the one I really want to see is Chaos versus Kyogre, probably followed by a Mewtwo versus Shadow rematch, but that's really cool. Okay, I look forward to watching that pitch then and really seeing what that matchup has to offer. So good luck with that, and thank you so much for the super chat. And Overlord, thank you as well. I was watching your Death Battle 26 predictions, and I do think there's one episode was missing, Ori versus the Knight. Now that we live in a post-Silk Song world, isn't that matchup likely? I did bring that one up in, oh, what was it? I did bring it up in my ideas for 2026 video, but of course I don't want too much repetition across all my videos. The prediction video, by the way, that he's referencing, that's a members only video. That's for the highest tiers that they can watch. So yes, I did not bring up Ori versus the Knight in that. Realistically, I think I probably should have as an honorable mention, but yes, I do still recognize it as something that could happen soon because of Silk Song and the like. So yeah, I probably should have brought that up, but it's you know, it's whatever. I brought it up in a previous video before. I still think it's a good idea for 2026. Thank you so much for the super chats. And we have FloofySune. Thank you so much. Top 5 most wanted rematch. One's not done yet, of course. I would say probably Mewtwo versus Shadow, Mario versus Sonic again. I guess maybe Tracer versus probably number 3 would be Sephiroth versus Virgil, maybe, and then maybe 3 or 4, Tracer versus Scout, Sephiroth versus Virgil. Those are probably pretty interchangeable. And then after that, I don't know. Those are the ones I usually think about the most. There are definitely some I don't want. Yeah, I kind of want to say Zoro versus Urza, maybe. I don't know if I want Ragna versus Soul, because I kind of want Ragna to fight someone else. I don't know. Number 5 is difficult, but at least those are my top 4. I can say that for absolute certainty. Thank you so much for the super chat. And finally, 10 Tails, thank you as well. Let me give both of those a heart, actually. If I ever send any matchup in your Ballot Banter, I'm going to type out, "Be brutal, destroy me somewhere in the back alley" as a joke. Yeah, that would be amazing of you. Yeah, like I said, I am not going to bash anybody for, even if it's a matchup like I utterly, like, don't like, I'm not going to bash anybody for their matchups. That's just not something I'm going to do. However, so I will be positive, but I'm also not going to say that I love it if I don't really love it, you know? You guys are amazing with the super chats. We're like 10 minutes in, we haven't even gotten started because you guys are just so great with that. Anyway, now I think we can get started. Again, for more super chats, I will make sure to read those, and otherwise I will make sure to keep an eye on the chat as well. But I think otherwise we can move on to the Ballot Banters. So if we switch it right to there, you guys can see my screen, you should be able to see it. So first up, we have Kill the Pig, Jack Meridew versus Napoleon, Lord of the Flies versus Animal Farm, an all-out war between literature's most well-known authoritarian extremist leaders in which man becomes animal and animal becomes man. That's pretty fun. Thank you, Cronathegoat, for becoming an Atrociraptor. That's a tier 3 member. Thank you so much. So if you want to submit for the next Ballot Banter, you absolutely can in the Discord. Yes, I should reiterate that it's in the Discord specifically where you can submit for Ballot Banters, as you can see here. So thank you so much for becoming a member. That is incredible of you. Thank you guys so much. But anyway, yes, talking about this one. So if I remember correctly, if I like, yeah, that doesn't really show it properly. So I'm just gonna leave it like this. You guys have a good look at the thumbnail just with this, right? It should be fine. I think when it comes to like track arts and stuff, I'll be sure to put a zoom in on that. But for the thumbnails, the formatting just doesn't work as well. But yes, for this one specifically, so this was actually a matchup that I put in my most recent video, which was what your most wanted death battle says about you, number 4, I think it was, whatever it was, like the most recent edition of that. I actually did put this one in there, and I forgot that this one was submitted when I did that, or when I wrote it in. My main books that I read in high school were actually not these guys. It was 1984 and Brave New World. Those were the 2 ones that I read the most in high school. I do think 1984 is better. I feel like a lot of people already kind of know that one. As far as I feel like a lot of people probably don't know what Brave New World is. No, it's not the Captain America movie. It's a book by Aldous Huxley where it kind of asks the question, what if Madara won? Not literally. It's kind of, instead of illusions, it's like pills, the soma that people take, and it kind of forces them to be happy. But of course, by doing that, it sacrifices your freedom, right? Because they're kind of making you feel how they want, you know, the government, the higher ups. So, you know, it asks the question, would you rather be happy or be free, right? I enjoyed that book, but I think 1984, you know, Big Brother is always watching is a little better. Thank you, Alex10, for the super chat. I'm also planning to see Ben and Chad at VidCon. I requested the day off from work just to meet them in person. Bro, I want to go to VidCon so bad. Like, my family and I eventually decided that we shouldn't do it. Or that I shouldn't go because of the crazy stuff that's going on with Canada and America. But man, like this was the chance I thought that I could meet some of my friends, like some of my online friends, and also just to see Ben and Chad at VidCon. I am so happy that you're able to go. That is amazing of you, and thank you for the super chat, of course. I wanted to go so badly, and it really sucks that I'm not going to be there. I would have liked, like for anyone else who's going out, I'd have liked to meet you guys, you know, just see you guys if you guys recognize me. But yeah, unfortunately no. But I really hope you enjoy it. But talking more about this matchup specifically, yeah, so Jack versus Napoleon. I would like to see more literary death battles in general, like ones that focus a lot more, or the media is more just in the text, right? I know that Animal Farm had that recent adaptation with Seth Rogen or whatever. I feel like some people might want to pretend that that doesn't exist. But I more so mean like their primary media is still the books, right? With maybe some one-off adaptation that we've seen elsewhere, right? That maybe not a lot of people know about. The primary stuff is still the books, as opposed to something like Harry Potter versus Percy Jackson, where, yes, they come from books, but a lot of people know them from the movies, and, like, they can use a lot of that footage, right? This really isn't that, right? So I would like to see more literary death battles in general. I feel like, though, I'm a little concerned about what Death Battle would need to do as far as the custom stuff, because after Gru versus Megamind, we know that if they have to do a lot of custom work for an episode, it might not turn out as well as maybe if, say, they didn't need to do as much custom work. And I feel like with something like this, they may... It worries me a bit about everything they'd have to do for it, especially since you could argue that this should be an army battle, right? Like the whole all-out war thing. So with that, with as much custom stuff as it would require, I would be a little concerned about that just based on what we've seen before. Usually I like to think about death battles in like the best case scenario for them, right? But after stuff like Gru versus Megamind, it does worry me a little bit about a unique situation like this, where there'd have to be a lot of stuff going on, but Death Battle would more than likely have to, like, create all of it from scratch, you know? So that does concern me a little bit. However, the matchup itself, I think, is pretty damn cool. There's a very thematic contrast there, of course, with the whole, like, man becomes animal and animal becomes man. That is very cool. I think, you know, incorporating that into not only the dialogue and the animation, but also just the way that the the analyses are written. Like, we can basically have this be like English class, right? Like describing the themes of the books and, you know, the arcs of the characters. Like, basically just having it be English class would be very fun, I think. Again, like, there's not that many episodes where you get the chance to do that, and like, this would be a great one for that, I think. As far as anything, I just keep looking back at my notes in case you're wondering why I'm looking down like this, just to make sure I've said everything. I think also, like, this works for a really good, like, fight scenario while still being different. Like, this isn't really quite like anything we've seen on Death Battle before, but it's still a very perfect fight setup, right? So I really appreciate that it's still unique, but it still works very well from a Death Battle perspective. And yeah, the editing and the nuance in the script, I feel like, could just go off. Imagine if this matchup gets people into reading, right? Like, Death Battle gets people into so many things. Imagine if this one actually got people into reading. You know, I feel like the Death Battle community could use some of that. I don't think it would actually happen. Like, I don't think it would, you know, send a lot of people out to read, like, a lot more of these kinds of stories, you know, like the middle to highbrow, literature, you know, but still, that would be fun to see. I think something like this would be cool. Again, I'm not sure if Death Battle would opt for it just because of everything they would have to do for it. Like, the analyses would be harder to do, the animation would be harder to do, but if they did it, and if they put, like, their all into it, that would be really cool. So this one gets a thumbs up for me, just for the sheer fact of how unique it is. I would definitely like to see something like that. So yeah, thanks for the submission. So that was the first one. How long? We were like 15 minutes into this and we've gone through one of them. So let's, I don't want to give away too much of what's coming next. You probably saw a little bit under there, but now we can move on to the next one. So Garou versus Kazuya, One Punch Man versus Tekken. Two fighters' power had corrupted them and attempted to conquer everything. Straight into the point, I appreciate that. So I haven't heard this one that much before. I think I've heard it a couple times, because Garou is one of those characters where, again, he's like Cell or Bakugo for me, where he just has so many opponents to the point where I feel like people are just choosing the opponents based on the characters that they're most familiar with, you know? Because I think if there was a really obviously best opponent for him, or really widely agreed upon, like, we would see that one talked about way more than his other matchups, but that just doesn't happen in the same way, right, as like a lot of other characters. And as far as Kazuya, I know he gets paired with Albert Wesker a lot, which also gets some criticism. I see Albert Wesker versus Kazuya very similar to, like, Vilgax versus Ridley, in the sense that it definitely could work, but I feel like there's just better options for both of them. Personally, for Albert Wesker, I think I'm more of a fan of Wesker versus Liquid Snake, to be honest, so I wouldn't mind seeing Kazuya fight someone else. The one thing that stands out to me about this matchup is that I'm not the most up-to-date with my Tekken scaling. This doesn't seem like it would be the closest fight. Like, just by looking at it, I'm not sure if Tekken gets up to that level that that Garou eventually gets up to. Maybe I'm wrong with that, but that's like the one thing that jumps out at me first, where it's like, I'm not quite sure how fair this would be, but I could be completely wrong. But other than that, I do think this is a decent opponent for both of these characters. I did go a little deeper into the connections, and the connections do seem fairly solid as far as their stories, like how they've progressed. Again, their corruption as well does seem like pretty decent connections. There's also a lot of over-the-top visuals that come from both of these series in different ways, of course. So seeing those in an animation together, I think would be a lot of fun. Let me move the mic a little bit closer. I think that's probably better. But yeah, I think seeing those over-the-top visuals clash together, you know, and upping the ante more and more as the animation progresses, you know, getting that sweet escalation, as I always bring up, like that would be really cool in a fight like this. And these do seem like they're among the last major characters that should come onto Death Battle. Like, obviously I want to see Lord Boros versus Battle Beast. That's like my most wanted One Punch Man episode. But other than that, yeah, Garou seems like one of the main One Punch Man characters that feels like they should come on to Death Battle. And Kazuya, like, I know there's a lot of different characters you can choose from Tekken, but like, I feel like a lot of the Tekken characters are going to fall into the background, kind of like a lot of the other Mortal Kombat characters and Street Fighter characters that haven't been used yet. Like, some of them, it feels like they kind of should have been used at this point, but a lot of them that haven't been used, it's like, yeah, it might be a bummer if you're a fan of those series, but it's not like, you know, it's an atrocity that they haven't been used yet. Kazuya, though, I feel like is like one of the Tekken characters that feels like if he's not used, what are we doing? Like, he should get an episode at some point, right? So I definitely don't think this is the be-all, end-all for either of these characters. I think there definitely are other matchups you can make, especially for Garu. Again, there's so much that he has. But I think this is still a decent option for both of them. The debatability is still the one thing that I'm thinking, like, I'm not so sure if that is fair. But again, I'm not completely up to date with my Tekken scaling. It might be fair. I just know that, especially like later on, like some of the characters in One Punch Man are just doing like absolutely wild stuff, you know. But thanks for the submission. I appreciate looking at it. Now moving on, Emperor Joker versus Goblin King, DC Comics versus Marvel. We're running the joke into the ground with this one. Thumbnail by Immediate Scream on Reddit. Actually, did I miss what other thumbnails were made by? No, it doesn't look like it. Okay, I want to make sure to say all that when it pops up. So yes, running the joke into the ground. The reason for that is because on the last episode of Ballot Banter, the same guy, actually, Certified Joe Swanson Stan, submitted just regular Joker versus Green Goblin. And I'm not going to talk about that one as much because I've already talked about it, but just to reiterate what I said in the last one, I was basically saying that there was a time where I didn't really like that matchup as much because even though it had an amazing personality, the debate thing was just too formulaic for me, like for a Spider-Man versus Batman fight, you know. However, I've been made more aware of some of the things that both of these characters have or could be given, and even though I think, like, for example, the most recent Joker versus Green Goblin blog kind of gave things to these characters that probably Death Battle wouldn't include, specifically Joker, I do think there was enough things you could argue should be included to make the debate a little more interesting than what I had initially thought, you know. So I've kind of come back around to liking that matchup again. That's like the Cliff's Notes of what I said last time. As far as this matchup, I used to like this one more than regular Joker versus Green Goblin for the reasons that I said, you know, why I didn't like Joker versus Green Goblin as much. And I guess in some ways I still do, because this one retains a lot of the personality, of course, that regular Joker versus Green Goblin would have. And it makes for a completely different debate, because it's not really a Spider-Man versus Batman thing anymore. It's just like, it's just, you know, an imp, like a fifth dimensional imp versus some version of the Infinity Gauntlet, you know? So that is very different. Thank you so much for the super chats. Cosmic Garu really ruins some matchups for versus debates. Yeah, see, like, that's kind of the thing that I was... that's the thing that I was kind of referring to when I say that. Again, though, I don't want to pretend that I know everything about the Tekken scaling when I'm not fully up to date, but that was the thing I was kind of thinking about, yeah. And thank you, Alex, for the $50. Holy shit, thank you. Garu versus Kazuya is a matchup with good connections, but the fight itself is vastly one-sided. Kazuya scales around the multi-continent to planet level, whereas Garu gets around multi-solar system level to galaxy via destroying numerous stars. I'm gonna be honest, that's even higher than I thought Kazuya might have gotten to. So the fact that that's still, you know, doesn't really stack up as much, you know, that is saying something. But again, I'm not gonna bash on anyone's matchup or anything. That's not the point of this. I still think that as far as the connections, like, it does make sense, you know. But of course, I do like a little more debatability in my matchups. But of course, I'm not trying to say you shouldn't like a matchup, right? Even if I don't like something in this video, it doesn't mean you should stop liking it. You probably don't need me to tell you that, you know? So please like the matchups that you want. This is really just to show off some matchups, right? More so than to review them. So as long as we just remember that that's the point of this, I think that's cool. But yeah, thank you so much for the $50, Alex Chen. That is incredible. The Candy Sensei, buy all the Death Battle plushies with our donations, mate. Yeah, if you guys were in the members only stream, the last one, which was, it's available to everybody. Then you know, it was available to all the members. I mean, like a tier 1 to tier 4. It's available for all the members. Then you would have seen that, yeah, there were some people saying, like, donate to the Raptor plushie fund now. Because I was saying that, like, I don't know if I'm going to get any more past Wiz. And I'm still not committing to anything past Wiz. I do have Boomstick right here. I always have Boomstick next to me during the streams, by the way. I'm still not committing to that, but yes, it does help me kind of justify stuff like that in my mind. Anyway, sorry to be interrupted, but thank you guys so much for the super chats. Holy crap. But yes, back to this one. So, like I was saying, I thought that, you know, the debatability here was just more interesting to me. And in some ways, you might still be able to argue that it is. But I also feel like it is a little cosmologically boring. Like, in the sense that if you know how strong fifth dimensional imps are, and you know how strong, like, this version of the Infinity Gauntlet is, because this is an alternate universe version of the Infinity Gauntlet, right? Like, this isn't main timeline Norman who got a hold of the main timeline Infinity Gauntlet. And I know some Infinity Gauntlets differ from one another across the multiverse, but it is the kind of thing where it's like, as soon as you know what scales cosmologically higher, the conversation is over, right? Which isn't amazing. I know there are some fights, though, that I like that kind of hold a similar notion, like Q versus Mr. Miggs' Pitalik, another fifth dimensional imp battle. So yeah, this was Joker when he got Mr. Miggs' Pitalik's powers, and Green Goblin, again, an alternate universe Green Goblin where he got a hold of the, or Norman Osborn, I guess, when he got a hold of the Infinity Gauntlet. So it is the kind of thing where I feel like the debate is very one note in that sense, but nonetheless, like, again, it still holds a lot of the same personality that, like, regular Joker versus Green Goblin has. It still would be interesting to learn about what fifth dimensional imps can do, like, just from a sheer analysis perspective, learning about what they can do is great, because, you know, you could say that, like, well, the fifth dimensional imp, you know, that's from, like, a higher dimension, so, like, should the Infinity Gauntlet be able to affect him, kind of like in a dark side way, like existing in the fourth world universe? But the Infinity Gauntlet, at least the main timeline one, has affected, like, tons of higher dimensional beings. But then again, the fifth dimension is not like geometrically, like, 2 dimensions above, like, our regular third dimension. DC does it weird where they do it like that, where, because they have, like, the 6th dimension, which is, like, beyond imagination, and, like, then it kind of just stops as far as conventional dimensioning, I guess, dimensional tiering. I don't freaking know, but there are definitely some ways that you can try to make this more interesting. Like, there are definitely some questions, I guess, you would have to answer as far as, like, whose takes precedence, you know, whose power is more supreme. But again, it's the kind of thing, like, once you realize that, it's like the debate is kind of over, you know? So it kind of goes both ways for me. I do think that this is a very respectable version of Joker versus Green Goblin. I kind of imagine Death Battle would just do the regular versions, though, because that's what most people would be looking up when they look up Joker versus Green Goblin. But if Death Battle were to actually do this version, I would respect them for it. Like, I'd be like, okay, cool, let's see how this goes, because you can also just imagine in the animation, like, where the hell are they going to take these guys' brains and their imagination as far as what they can create, you know? Like, imagine these guys with the powers of God, you know, and just putting that in an animation. That would be crazy. Like, there's definitely more potential in that than, like, regular Joker versus Green Goblin, you know? So yeah, I definitely still respect this version of the matchup, but I can't say that, like, I solidly love it more than regular Joker versus Green Goblin. I see them as, like, as 2 very different matchups, both debate-wise and animation potential-wise. You kind of just pick whichever version you want, right? So yeah, cool idea. This is a very, very fun idea. Let me take a drink of water before we move forward. I do have my water with me, but if I drink too much water, I'm gonna run out before I really need it. How are we doing? We're about half an hour in. So we're about 1/6 of the time done. Okay, we should probably, not to rush through these, but I probably don't want to waste too much more time rambling or anything. So we have Kane versus Michael here, but then if we scroll down, you can see we also have Kane versus 4. So I'm probably just gonna review, like, both of these matchups, or talk about both of these matchups, like, at the same time. I think in the first episode we had something similar where we had Goro Akechi, or Crow from Persona, literally 2 matchups back to back. So thankfully they were structured this way where I can kind of just review both of them at once. First, let's read the super chat, though. Mr. Goodies, thank you so much for the $5. Yo, Raptor, great to see you. Quick question. For my post, I have a link to the thumbnail, but should I delete that part? I think you said no links. I don't think I said no links specifically. You don't have to delete this right now. It's fine. I think in the future, yeah, maybe links aren't really necessary. Like, they don't have to be there. They probably just clutter things up. But either way, you know, I think it's probably okay. Don't worry about it for right now. You know, maybe I'll revise the rules if I feel like it's really important. But thank you so much for the super chat, and thank you for your question. You guys are awesome. But yeah, just reading both of these at first. So Kane versus Michael, Amazing Digital Circus versus The Good Place. I alone can't bring it to justice, so I'm just going to leave this here in case you're curious about the depths of the connections. But as a brief summary, spoilers for both shows. Okay, spoilers. If you don't want to be spoiled for either of these shows, then please look away now. Both in charge of a misleading reality that their humans are trapped in, where they're tortured, but somehow get a chance to become better people from connecting with each other. In the end, these all-powerful beings and in the spot that the other one was in the start of the show, which is a great tragic contrast. Thumbnail made by Fine Macaroon 8827 on Reddit. And there's a Reddit post right there. And then for this one, we have Kane vs. 4, The Amazing Digital Circus versus Battle for Dream Island. Silly yet powerful reality warping gods who act all goofy and pretty dumb, but in reality crave attention and validation from their contestants, who they force into their adventures. Thumbnail and art by Crab and LeafC, still a clone respectively. Thank you guys so much for your work on that. And of course, I think this one will also get, yeah, it gets cropped out a little bit. That's the problem with like the horizontal art. But still, yeah, take a look at this. This looks awesome. And the thumbnails also look really good too. These are very creative thumbnails. So again, trying to cover basically both of these at more or less the same time. We can scroll down a little bit for here. Trying to cover both of these at more or less the same time. I do think that out of all the characters from the Amazing Digital Circus, Kane is the one that fits the best in a death battle-like format. He's not like the most known for like an actual physical combat or like a fight situation really in any sense of the word, but that doesn't mean he doesn't work for death battle. I think in some cases it means some characters realistically shouldn't be on death battle, but some characters do have the potential to be on death battle. Like they're very workable for that format, even if fighting isn't really what they're most known for, right? Like I think of something like Sly Cooper versus Lupin III, you know? They're not like their main shtick isn't fighting, but they still have every, you know, means available to them to be in a fight to the death situation and for that to be interesting. I probably wouldn't put Kane on that level, but I also wouldn't put him as low as someone where it's like realistically I don't think they should be on death battle, you know? So I think as long as you give him the right opponent, he works. But of course, now it's like which one do we prefer? So we have Kane versus Michael here, which I think this one is pretty damn interesting. I think it does have a very fitting contrast, or again, the whole like they start and end in opposite places as each other. That's definitely really interesting. And I think this is one of the few like live action sitcoms where I actually think like one of the characters from it could work in a versus debate setting, because like most live action sitcoms are just based off of our own world and they don't have any combative components, so it's like, why are we trying to put them in a death battle? This one actually feels like it could work. I would be a little concerned, kind of like with Jack versus Napoleon. I feel like death battle would have to take some liberties as far as like how the animation would look. Like I think the vision for like how this would look as an actual fight isn't very clear. And Death Battle, of course, they want to try to stay true to the characters, but also making it an entertaining fight. So, like, the way that this fight would look, I'm not 100% sure, like, if Death Battle would have the best idea of that. Not to say that this matchup would be destined to fail or anything if it became an episode, I'm not saying that at all, but I think it might be a little difficult to like actually put this to an animation that's like really entertaining and really fitting for both the characters. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe there's a really easy way of doing it, but like for putting them in like an actual physical fight, I think that might just be a little difficult on Death Battle's end. But even still, you know, it's still a creative idea. It still feels like a very sensible comparison, and the script, I feel like it could go off regardless. Again, talking about the whole introspective stuff and the arc-related stuff, so that definitely works out really well. As far as Kane versus 4, I think this one's cool. I think this one has more of a clear vision for like how this would look put to an animation. Like I feel like I'm imagining like how the fight would look a lot more clearly, you know, and I feel like that just makes Death Battle's job easier in that sense. I do think though that 4 does have a decent amount of other opponents though that you could realistically work with. Like I've heard 4 versus Flumpty, I've heard 4 versus the Collector, I think from the Owl House, that's right. And Kane, of course, we all know he has so many matchups. So these two, I do think they work really well together. Anything else in, like, again, really cool animation potential that I think, again, is more obvious, like, more obvious how it would be done. And obviously there's a much more, like, consistent, like, tone of personality, I think, like, just as far as not just the characters themselves, but the series they come from. I feel like that tone is a little more consistent. So I guess the way I would put it is that, like, I think this is the more interesting comparison. Just my opinion, of course. I think this is the more interesting comparison, where it's like, oh yeah, like they, like, based on their stories and how everything worked out, like, this is a really fun matchup to think about. It's a really fun way to compare these kinds of characters. Like, I think I like how interesting this matchup is, but I think this one, there's more of a vision for, like, how it would look, how it would be animated, like, in the more traditional sense, right? So it kind of just depends on what you prefer. I guess what I'm saying is that this one, I think, would be more likely to succeed. I think it'd be more likely to satisfy everybody, you know, as far as it being turned into an episode. Whereas this one, I think if they could pull it off, it would be fantastic. But I think this one is more easy to fumble just because it might be difficult to put a satisfying animation to it that's also representative of both of the characters. But of course, again, you know, maybe you disagree on that. That's fair too. But yeah, I think both of these are very viable options for Kane. It just depends on what Death Battle can do, how they can do it, and how confident they are in doing it. So yeah, 2 cool Kane matchups. Thank you guys for that. And just one more look at this. This is really fun. Next up, Audrey Redheart versus Masked Kid, Wandersong versus Underhero, Cyclone. According to the cycle, a hero will always be chosen to save the world from corruption. But if they have to do awful things to accomplish this, is it really worth it? Is the hero who tried to end the world better than the villain who tried to save it? First of all, this pitch, like this hook for the matchup, is excellent. This feels like something that I would see on like the back of a novel to like hook you into the story. I love the way that this is written. This is really cool. I do have to say, I have to apologize a little bit because before this was submitted, I had never heard of these characters or these series. I did look them up a little bit just to get a better idea of what I was looking at, so don't worry about that. But like, I haven't really like engaged with either of these series. I will say, haven't really done that at all. And yeah, like I said, intriguing summary that I see right here. There definitely seems to be some really strong themes of like, you know, destiny and choices, like the choices you make, whether the ends justify the means and all that, and you know, whether destiny is in your own hands or it's in like, you know, the universe's hands or whatever. Like all of that is really cool. So that's a really cool concept for a matchup because, you know, there's writing potential galore with stuff like that, right? Like Death Battle is really good at that kind of stuff. I do think that this is maybe just a little too really like, you know, spices it up, but like with only like 1 or 2 main contrasts, right? Like I'm thinking like, you know, Zamasu versus Gore, or fused Zamasu versus Gore the God Butcher, you know? Like, I feel like that's a really good example of that. This one, on the other hand, feels more like there's like one main connection, and like that leads to like a whole slew of contrasts, you know, which isn't usually what I prefer. I usually prefer when, again, like it's mostly built on connections and there might be like 1 or 2 contrasts to spice it up. This feels like it's mostly contrasts that are held together by like one main connection, and you're allowed to like matchups like that. I think there is still a value in those kinds of matchups. It's just not the kind of contrast matchup that I usually prefer, you know what I mean? Because the main connection is that like their destinies were kind of flipped, right? From what I'm understanding, that's like the main connection, but then because of that, like nearly everything else is contrast, at least from what I'm seeing. So I don't prefer that as much, but I still find this to be a very eye-catching concept. There's naturally a very unique animation style to come out of this. The debate seems decent enough. Like, again, like I'll take what I can get when it comes to the debate. It seems like it's not so one-sided that, you know, it's not worth doing or anything. So, especially since there's probably also a lot of other people who don't really know these characters. So for that point alone, I think the debate is all right. Again, introspective analyses, that's always great. And these are more niche indie series, I think, than what Death Battle would probably use, or at least first. But I do think that we should get some more indie series being used on Death Battle in general. So regardless of how it happens, I would definitely like that. So like I said, not much to say about the specific characters just because I'm not that familiar with them. But based on this, yeah, very interesting concept, definitely. A little more contrasty than I would usually want. but it is still a very interesting idea. And if Death Battle were to do this, like, again, they could go off with the writing, like in the analyses. I'd be more excited for the analysis than the animation, probably just because of the concepts that these characters have. So that's really cool. Distorted Memories, Tinky Winky versus Penny Pig, Slendy Tubbies versus Piggy. Distorted and affected versions of childhood characters, Peppa Pig and Teletubbies. Both were joke characters but have been treated more seriously. Both tried to save the families and friends they had left before becoming infected, and both were influenced by an otherworldly or higher dimensional being. Thumbnail by you. Thank you so much for the thumbnail. That is very unsettling. So, believe it or not, we've actually seen Slendy Tubbies on this series before in the previous episode. I don't remember if it was the same person who submitted it, but I know we've definitely seen that before. And as far as this does feel like a very similar concept where it's like horror parodies of, like, you know, pre-existing things, and I feel like that kind of has to be what a lot of the connective tissue is if you're trying to put something like Slendy Tubbies into Death Battle. I think I actually do prefer something a bit more like this, just because there is the added bonus of it being like 2 kids shows. Like in the previous one, I remember, I think it was a TF2 horror indie thing versus Slendy Tubbies. This I think I prefer a little bit just because there's that added bonus of it being like 2 kid shows, right? That's just me though. I like it when there's a little extra stuff there, and there do look to be like other enough other connections for it to make sense as well. You know, it's not just kid shows that got turned into a horror thing. So I appreciate that. I do like both are influenced by an otherworldly higher dimensional being. There's just something about that sentence is funny. But yeah, no, that definitely works out. I do almost feel like a disclaimer might be needed at the beginning of an episode like this. Like, I know they could still put, like, Tinky Winky versus Penny Pig, Slendy Tubbies versus Piggy in the title and have the thumbnail be something like this. But I still feel like there might be some people who, like, accidentally click on this video, like some really young kids. I almost feel like, kind of like Justin Bieber versus Rebecca Black, they need to make it clear, like, this is, like, these versions of the characters. Like, don't watch if you're a kid or something. Because I just feel like, you know, with how big the internet is, it could potentially happen to at least someone, you know. But you know, that's neither here nor there. That doesn't say that the matchup is good or bad. Just something that I think that if Death Battle were to do this, they might want to do something like that just to be safe, you know. But otherwise, I assume both of these characters can work in like a combat setting. I assume there's stuff that's like analyzable enough for both of them, and if so, I think this does work decently well. There's tones and vibes galore. Like, I feel like there's such an easy way to put the right tone in, you know, inject the right level of creepiness into everything, you know, the animation, the analyses, just whiz and booms to getting like freaked out at everything that happens as they describe it. Like, that'd be hilarious. And the analyses, I feel like, again, I don't really know like how in-depth these series have in terms of like lore or anything, but I almost feel like it would be it would either be like very quick analyses because there's not that much to talk about, or it would be like a surprising lore dump. Like, I feel like there's either a lot of lore or not a lot of it, and that's really funny to think about. Like, would these be quicker analyses, or would these be like surprisingly long ones? That's something that's really fun. I don't know how lore heavy these series are, but I feel like it would be one of the two most likely. And Death Battle has said, you know, if analyses are short, they're just short. So I don't think that would prevent them from doing an episode or anything. And as I said in the previous episode, like, just stuff like this would be interesting. Whether it's this specifically or something that's, like, more along the lines where it, like, reimagines previously established characters in, like, other genres, whether it's, like, indie or not or whatever. Something like that I feel like would be really interesting. So yeah, again, the idea of just, like, Teletubbies and Peppa Pig put together like this, like, it definitely interests me, but I think a disclaimer at the beginning, if Death Battle were to do this, might be warranted. But yeah, that's a fun idea. Let me get another drink of water. I keep scrolling too much. I keep showing you guys what the next one's gonna be. But I think we're making decent time now. We should be halfway done this through by the time we get to like 2:30 for me. Right now it's 1:45, so we're about a quarter of the way through. We're probably about a quarter of the way through the submissions as well, so that's good. We have the most amount of submissions that we've ever had, so I gotta make sure I just I just step on the gas with this one. So Purge the Plague, Project Blackwing / Death Troopers versus the Metal Virus / Zombots. Star Wars Legends versus Sonic IDW. Gray Liquid Diseases created by madmen to conquer everything, now gone out of control, taking over not just living entities, but fauna and beloved heroes as well. Which virus will come out as the superior zombifying plague? Thumbnail by you. Okay, so first thing I want to say, before I say anything else about this idea, is that it sounds fucking awesome. This idea just, it feels so right. You know, like, I'm actually surprised that Death Battle hasn't done anything like a virus matchup before. Like, they've done army stuff before, sure, but nothing where it's like just like a group of like this group of people infected by this virus and this group of people infected by this virus. We've never really seen them analyze a matchup like that, right? Whether it's like Sonic and Star Wars or not, right? Where there's just like normal people that exist in like a relatively normal world, you know? So I am surprised Death Battle's never done something like that, and doing it like this sounds really cool. Like this saying like banger at the bottom, like the reactions. Yeah, I definitely agree. I do think this is quite the banger of an idea. I think it allows for a very unique series combination, like a very uncommon series combination. Because like, what other Sonic versus Star Wars matchups even exist? This would be a very fun way to like put them together in this way. And I feel like, yeah, there's a unique style for this one, how it's framed in the writing and the animation, and the progression of it, like maybe just getting more and more people infected as the battle goes on, or just them getting more vicious as it goes on, like, you know, just upping the scale of it as the battle goes, maybe like showing more of the fight that we hadn't even seen like since the beginning or anything. Like, there's so many ways that you can just show the sheer scale of something like this, right? The one thing that makes me a little concerned about a matchup like this, though, and again, I don't know if this is actually true, but the one thing that makes me concerned is the possibility that one virus kind of just overrules the other. Whether it's that, like, it's the perfect counter to the other virus, or one of the viruses can actually, like, you know, overtake the other virus, and so, like, you can infect the other virus's people with the first virus. You know what I mean? Like, one virus can outdo the other virus and make them infected, and maybe the other virus can't do that, you know? So it's like eventually it just kind of leads to only one side being infected, you know? And I do find something like that, like an undebatability like that, to be worse than something like just stat differences, because stat differences are pretty unavoidable, right? You can't really avoid them in like any matchup that you look at. But something like that where it's like, oh well, is one virus more secure? Does it overrule the other virus by like infecting or assimilating more people than the other virus can do? That if that is true, then that would kind of kill my interest a little bit in this matchup. Although maybe it is the kind of thing where each virus is actually equally as good as infecting the other, and therefore it's like swapping back and forth. Or maybe it's more like, you know, neither of them can actually infect the other, like overrule the other infection, and they just, you know, it's just a regular army battle. Or maybe one virus is way better at infecting the other, but the other side has better stats, you know, the stat differences are in its favor. That could actually be interesting if the one-sided nature falls more like that. That could be cool. Thank you, Ranger Forever, for the super chat. Does Ultron versus Sigma count? Both are AI viruses. I suppose it does count. I'm thinking more just like the viruses on their own, like not really led by a certain, you know, head, like a certain person. But I suppose, yes, you could say that that does count. That, like, the main thing going on there is still the virus, and that, you know, Sigma is defeated by the Ultron AI, and there's the Sigma virus and all that. I guess you could say that, but I'm just thinking more like, you know, just like a regular army of like a virus that, because I assume that, well, I know how the metal virus was started, like that was Eggman. But the Project Blackwing, maybe that was also created by someone specifically, but like, I don't know if I imagine Eggman being in this battle, you know what I mean? Like, I kind of imagine it just being like the infected versus the infected, and you're leaving it up to that. But I guess that is fair. You know, you could say that Ultron versus Sigma was kind of like the one virus matchup we've gotten so far. Thank you so much for the super chat. But yeah, like, again, it's difficult to say exactly how that debatability would go. I feel like, You know, it could be interesting, but I feel like it has the potential to not be interesting, just depending on how deep you dig. I also assume that these have just like specifically Star Wars Legends versus Sonic IDW because that's where these things started, as opposed to like trying to restrict the scaling to just those, because I don't think Death Battle would do that. I assume this is just there because that's where these things came from. So either way though, conceptually this goes very hard. Like, this is a very cool idea. I definitely like it. It's just the idea, yeah, how does the debate actually work here? Does one virus completely overrule and assimilate the other side, or is it more interesting than that? I just hope it's more interesting than that. That's kind of the main thing I have to say about that. But yeah, very cool idea. I was very happy to see this one. Next up, we have the Ultimate Video Game Mascot Battle Royale. In the world of video games, only a few have the ability to truly ascend to the highest level of fame and recognition you can possibly get. The fame of becoming a company mascot and having a crap ton of games made for you. Thumbnail by me. So who do we have? We have Mario versus Sonic versus Crash Bandicoot versus Bomberman versus Spyro versus Rayman versus Pac-Man versus Mega Man. So that is a lot of people there. So it's difficult for me to review this matchup specifically because like there's just so much going on here. It's kind of difficult to talk about like the specifics of what would happen. For me, like, I'm kind of more interested in talking about the idea of like, when should a matchup become a battle royale? Right? Because there's a lot of different ideas being thrown around where it's like, do we have like Henry Stickmin versus the Second Coming, just have that as that own matchup, or do we turn that into like a Stickman battle royale? There's stuff where it's like, should Naruto just fight Luffy? Should he just fight Ichigo again? Or should that be like a battle royale between the three of them? You know, like there's some times where it's like, what should we do with these characters? Because we can also see that like Mario and Sonic are both here, right? But like, should we just do Mario versus Sonic 3, or should we do this? There's also Crash and Spyro here, who already fought. There's Crash and Rayman, which is a matchup in and of itself, right? So I think the idea is more like, you know, should we do the 1v1s or should we do something like this? I feel like it can depend on a couple factors, like, I feel like it could depend on how well the 1v, like a certain 1v1 matchup works on its own versus how it would work in a battle royale. Maybe also how much the battle royale changes the debate, maybe how many characters there are in it. I think something like this, just because of the sheer amount of characters there are, like at this point, this isn't Mario versus Sonic with just a little bit extra. This isn't Crash versus Rayman with just a little bit extra. This is like so much other shit, right? So just from that perspective alone, I do see this as like a very different kind of battle and something that could realistically work for me, something that could realistically be a lot of fun for me. I will say that it's hard for me to imagine Death Battle going with just something like Ultimate Video Game Mascot Battle Royale, because people are going to complain about, why wasn't this character there? You know, because he was one of my favorite characters and he's such a big mascot, you know? Like, the specific character selection when you just have a title that vague, I think is going to piss some people off. I think if Death Battle were to do something like this, it would be more likely they would do something like Nintendo mascots battle royale or something, right? That way it's like a little more objective for what they can use, you know? But I understand wanting to put like these specific characters, because I've seen a lot of people make trailers of just like favorite character battle royale, right? And even though Death Battle would never do something like that, I do understand the appeal of just having a lot of the characters that are near and dear to you, and just having like just a ton of characters for the sake of having a ton of characters in a battle, right? I totally get that. I totally get that appeal. But yeah, I do think people would complain if something if it was just like as vague as that. I would also be a little concerned that like, when you, because even though I said, you know, you get to so many characters and therefore it becomes a different debate, I do also think that when you get to so many characters, it's also easy to be like, oh, well, these 4 are out, or these 3 are out, and then it's like, well, are they even really worth putting in the Royale in the first place? Or do we maybe just want to cut it down to like 5 characters because that's easier, and, you know, some characters were already ruled out anyway. Kind of similar to the Mega Man Battle Royale, where everyone knew that Volnut was doomed, you know? When you have this many characters in a Battle Royale, it kind of becomes obvious that some characters don't really need to be there, right? Thank you, Santiago, for the super chat. I saw some asking for Superman versus Optimus Prime or Superman versus Ultraman. I like that one. But personally, before all that, For some variation, they should make the first Optimus Prime versus Ultraman. Well, I don't think they're gonna do all 3 of those, for instance. Like, I think if they're gonna do something like that, like, they're just gonna do one of them, right? Like I said before, I think some version of Superman versus some version of Optimus Prime, like, maybe just like the Justice League animated series version of Superman versus like the G1 cartoon Optimus Prime might be like my ideal version of something like that. Because I think comic Superman versus, like, you know, Optimus Prime doesn't really work, because I feel like the debate is just too unnecessary, especially based on what we've seen before. But you know, yeah. Optimus Prime versus Ultraman, I guess they could do that. I think Optimus Prime will come back at some point, but it might be against Superman, it might be against someone else. You know, we don't know. But yeah, thank you so much for the super chat. But yeah, that's basically all I have to say about this one. Like, it would be a ton of fun, right? Like, as long as they have the budget for it, something like this would be a crap ton of fun. But again, I think my main concerns for it would be more so the character selection, and do we need this amount of people if there's already going to be, like, some characters that are ruled out because we just know they fall below a lot of the other characters. But then, of course, if you keep extrapolating that out, then what, do we eventually just go back to Mario versus Sonic? Like, is that what we would be leading to at that point? You know, I don't know. But either way, this is a very fun thought. So thank you so much for the submission. Something like we need more battle royales in general, right? Like some kind of huge battle royale would be fun. Or it doesn't even need to be huge. Just like some kind of battle royale. We should get more of those. So then we have this fucking thing. No, I'm kidding. Silver Tongue, Michael DeSanta versus Victor Sullivan, GTA versus Uncharted. Both are thieves in their own right who have been in their ballpark for many years, taking a younger protege under their wing into their respective work, Nathan Drake and Franklin Clinton respectively, often getting into deadly and dangerous situations with them involved. Both also eventually retired but came out of it, whether it was to aid themselves or their apprentices, right? Yeah, apprentices. So I will say I've never seen this matchup before. This is really interesting. Like, I've seen Michael DeSanta get put into a lot of different matchups, some of which I think are kind of more generic than others. Like, it kind of feels like an excuse just to try to get Michael onto the death battle, get Michael onto a death battle rather than trying to find like a really, really good opponent for him. So some of his matchups I like more than others. I've never heard this one before. I will also say I'm not very familiar with, like, not the most familiar with either of these franchises. Surprise, surprise. But as far as this, like, I could see this one working. I think this one feels pretty decent. It definitely emphasizes the mentorship side of the characters a lot. I feel like with Victor Sullivan, regardless of what matchup you put him in, you kind of have to, right? You kind of have to emphasize, because if you're not emphasizing that, what are you emphasizing? Michael, I feel like you could kind of take his matchmaking in a couple of other different directions. You don't need to focus on his mentorship side of his character. But I feel like this also works very well for him. Like, the connective tissue is obviously there. It obviously lines up pretty decently with their stories, you know, from beginning to end, or for, you know, from their from when they were more involved in the story to maybe when they started getting less involved in the story, you know, that kind of thing. So that definitely works. I really like how this uses like the ridiculousness of their worlds with quote-unquote real people. Like with Michael DeSanta, obviously crazy stuff happens because it's GTA, right? You know, whether it's a mission or you're just doing crazy things because it's a sandbox video game where you fly a helicopter into whatever, like you can have a bunch of crazy stuff happen. And of course with Victor Sullivan, it's more what's the word? It's more straightforward than that, where it's just the levels you go on have ridiculous stuff as well. So just the fact of like how ridiculous these series can get is really, really cool, you know? So I really like that. I feel like that could make for a really fun animation, really, really fun, really, really greatly described analyses, you know, just seeing how just seeing how the character, how they react to what these characters have gone through, you know, just despite being normal people. Always got to say that because, you know, it's always fictional, right? And I do think GTA deserves at least one episode, whether it's Michael or whether it's Trevor Phillips. I've heard a lot of matchups for him as well. I feel like either Michael or Trevor or Franklin, if you really want. I feel like one of those guys should definitely get an episode at some point. And yeah, just describing the worlds from these characters' perspectives specifically could be a lot of fun. So, yeah, again, seen a lot of stuff from Michael. Some I like more than others, but this one definitely works. This one could be, as long as you emphasize the mentorship side of Michael enough, you really sell why these characters are similar, then yeah. Even if it is a little one-sided, again, just the sheer fact that these guys go through such ridiculous things, I think I would still like it, even if it does turn out to be pretty one-sided. The fact that they can both, just survive insane shit, is kind of enough for me to get excited anyway. Thank you, Santiago. I personally think if they're going to make Optimus Prime versus Superman to make it more unique, it should be Bay versus Optimus Prime versus Snyder versus Superman. Yeah, that's another version of the matchup they could definitely do. That's actually probably one that gets tossed around more than just the cartoon versions. So yeah, no, I definitely see that as well, for sure. That's a version they could do that I still think would be more interesting than the regular versions. Just because, like, I know people want, Superman and Optimus Prime to cross over or whatever, but, like, I feel like that's just better for, like, a comic crossover or something, as opposed to, trying to put them in a fight to the death where it's horrendously one-sided and one of them is going to die, And I know people don't want either of them to die, so, how does that work? But yeah, no, this is a cool idea. I haven't seen this one before, but this is a cool idea. Getting another Uncharted episode would be very interesting. That wouldn't have Nathan Drake in it. But, it would definitely still appeal to a good amount of people. Next up, we have, let me just get my notes ready. At what cost? Heaven versus Hell. Has-Been Hotel versus Ultra Kill. While one is a living dimension born of flawed gods' hatred, and the other is a dimension made to safeguard the ones who have done no wrong. Hell's denizens suffer at the hands of angels refusing to change. Heaven, stuck in its ways, kills sinners in cold blood. I don't know how to make thumbnails. That's alright. No worries about that. I will say I'm a little confused about what I'm looking at right here, like just Heaven versus Hell, because I tried looking up this matchup and I wasn't really able to find anything talking about this. I imagine this just means like the residents of Heaven in Has-Been Hotel versus the residents of Hell in Ultra Kill. I imagine that's what this is going for. I've heard Adam versus Gabriel a lot, like Adam from Has-Been Hotel, Gabriel from Ultra Kill, and I'm not sure if that's supposed to be like an army battle. Based on what I've looked up, I don't think it is supposed to be. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong on that. Either way, like I feel like this is a way to kind of put more of just like the general series against each other rather than just one character versus one character, like having all of Heaven versus all of Hell. Personally, I don't know if I feel like I need that. I feel like just Adam versus Gabriel kind of works enough for me as like a Has-Been Hotel versus Ultra Kill matchup, but I understand the appeal for something like this, like trying to look at the series more as a whole, trying to look at what is the difference between Heaven in one series and Hell in the other, because it allows the analyses as well to talk about like so many things that these series have, right? And maybe not like just character focused things, but I still feel like you can get enough of that even if it is just one character versus one character, So personally, I think I would probably prefer something like Adam versus Gabriel. The one thing that's kind of throwing me off, again, just making sure I understand what I'm looking at here, is like one is a living dimension. Like I imagine it's not literally the dimensions fighting each other, unless it is. But I imagine it's more so just like everyone in Heaven versus everyone in Hell. That's kind of what I'm getting with this one. So again, just a little confused. Maybe would have appreciated a bit more description of what I'm looking at. But yeah, it would have a lot going on, and it definitely makes for a tougher talk with how much stuff would be going on in here. But of course, it does also mean it's a bigger undertaking, which, Death Battle has been doing more army or team. Well, I don't know if I want to say team, but like army related stuff. They're doing more undertakings, obviously. But again, with stuff like Gru versus Megamind, where it doesn't always work, as well as maybe some of us would have hoped. I think they may want to stay on the safer side with this. But yeah, this does give an excuse to look at the worlds more as a whole, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I also think that you don't necessarily need it to be Heaven versus Hell to do that, right? But if Death Battle were to announce this, I would be intrigued. I definitely would be, just to see what the hell is going on here, what the Heaven is going on here, So yeah, definitely would be intrigued by all that. Next up, the Sector's Curse. Suguru Ghetto versus Ramatra, Jujutsu Kaisen versus Overwatch. Two former students of groups made to bring betterment to the planet, but the horrors of the world broke them and caused them to make their own organizations to bring the world to their knees. Also, they were buddies with people who use orbs as weapons. That's funny. What does that say there? Oh, okay, I see what that's saying. Thank you, oh my god, Kinjorix, thank you so much for the gifted memberships. Holy shit, thank you again for that. We should probably be at 60 members then, if not even more. That is amazing, thank you for that. Yeah, so for all you guys, for anyone who just got gifted the membership, you're now a Velociraptor, so that means you're a tier 2 member. If you join the Discord, you'll be able to submit for the next Ballot Banter, so if you want to do that. And also, if you want to have your name on, just going back to the standby screen really quickly. Yeah, so everything you see here, those are all the Velociraptors, Atrociraptors, and Megaraptors. So if you want to see your name on, you know, future videos and future streams like this, then you can join. But of course, everyone who just got gifted, you'll see yours in the in next month's videos. And of course, you can also, you know, renew your membership if you want to keep going. But either way, you know, whether you renew it or not, I hope you enjoy your stay. Thank you again, Kinjorix, so much. That is incredible of you. Everyone give claps for Kinjorix. Gifted memberships are amazing. And yeah, of course, if you want to join on your own, you're free to do that. Join button's down below. Yeah, as far as this matchup goes, so this is another one that I don't think I've literally ever seen before. I do understand the connections, though. I think the connections are pretty cool in that, like, making their own organizations, you know, and ruling it in their own image, you know, that sort of thing. I think that is a pretty cool idea, you know, very story-based connections, obviously. And it allows Death Battle to delve into these characters' specific histories, which is very cool, you know, a way that maybe they wouldn't, like, delve into their histories in a way that maybe they wouldn't if these characters were put into different matchups, because it might emphasize other things, you know? So I think that's really cool. And I do feel like a 3D fight would probably be the best way to represent this matchup, just because, like, you could do it in 2D, but, like, I don't know if I see them doing an Overwatch matchup in 2D, and clearly we know they can do Jujutsu Kaisen in 3D well enough. I feel like I'd probably prefer a 3D fight for this one, but I guess 2D would be fine. But I'd probably prefer 3D. But yeah, probably the best way, I think, to mix their styles in properly, you know, because if you want to really emphasize the Overwatch combat, I think 3D does work better for that. I have no idea how Overwatch scales, I'll be honest. I don't really know, probably, like, what Death Battle has said about Tracer and Widowmaker in those episodes. It definitely doesn't tell the whole story. Based on what, again, kind of similar to a Garu versus Kazuya, just based on my own knowledge of the characters, I don't know if this would be the closest still. It does kind of feel, again, kind of obviously one-sided, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Overwatch scales a little higher than what I'm anticipating. And I do also feel like it is a bit of a clash of talents. Like, they don't really have a lot of the same abilities from what I'm gathering, which could work in two ways. It could either be a really cool debate because they have such different power sets, or again, it could be kind of like, well, one really overrules the other, right? It could be something like that as well, which I don't really like when something like that happens. But again, not 100% sure, but I think there are definitely ways to I think there are definitely ways to see, you know, whether the debate really holds up or not. Also, I just noticed in your name you put Hi Raptor. Hello, Meanie. Thank you. But yeah, as far as yeah, so like, the debate could be cool or it could kill the discussion. I don't know if this would be my preferred for either of these characters, but that's also hard to say because I don't think I have a preferred for either of these characters right now. So there's not a matchup I'd be thinking about where if Death Battle announced this, I'd be like, okay, sure, why not? Let's do it. I'm not really thinking like, oh, Ghetto should definitely fight someone else. Ramatra should definitely fight someone else. I think Ghetto has like a bigger spread from what I've seen, or a more active spread. So there might be some people thinking, oh, Ghetto should fight this character. But I'd be okay with this if Death Battle decided to do it. I would want to learn a little bit more though about like how the fight dynamic actually works and like how the debate actually works. Because my biggest concern would be that it would be pretty one-sided and there wouldn't really be like an interesting discussion behind it, but maybe there is. I would have to look a little more into that. Otherwise though, again, very interesting idea, very cool way to connect the characters. That is pretty cool. So this, I think, after we do this one, this will be about the halfway mark, which is good because we're about an hour in, a little over an hour in. I think technically I can go a little beyond 3 hours if I really need to, but like 3 hours is probably the part where I should start wrapping things up. If I can. Dang, this water's good. This is good water. But yeah, again, thank you guys so much for your submissions. Thank you for your messages as well. You guys have been amazing with the super chats, by the way, and the gifted memberships, of course, now. So thank you guys so much for that. Your support is absolutely insane, but I of course I appreciate it. So thank you. But now we have Uzi Dorman versus Izzy Fisher, Murder Drones versus Black Widow Apocalypse. Two edgy, sharp, and impulsive female protagonists with emo aesthetics that come from an indie media project. After a near-fatal encounter with a mysterious stranger, they band together to dismantle a corrupt corporation that has infiltrated their community, sparking the central conflict of the story. Seems to be a link to the thumbnail by Reddit user Useful Ad. I don't think there's okay, we do have the post here. Yeah, okay. So Useful Ad, I think, made the thumbnail, or at very least the post. Probably the thumbnail as well. Okay, very cool. So we have talked about Izzy before on this channel a couple times. Izzy was in the it was in the Champions Island stream. She was one of the characters for our fan-made Champions Island. And we talked about Izzy versus Jack Kamen on the most recent Ballot Banter as well, which is a matchup that I said that I thought was pretty cool. Like, I thought could actually turn out really fun. I feel like it's difficult though, because I feel like, you know, Jack Kamen could also work well for Travis Touchdown, but then there's also Scott versus Travis, but Travis could fight somebody else, like or Scott could fight Naoto and Daba. I feel like that's a good one too. And Izzy could fight Uzi. Uzi has a lot of not great opponents from what I've seen. If you remember from my most recent video where your most wanted death battle says about you, I was saying that Uzi versus doesn't matter. You know, you choose your favorite matchups by the characters you want, not by how good the matchup actually is. Because a lot of it feels like a forced attempt to put Uzi into a matchup rather than actually, you know, finding a good one for her. I will say, though, that out of all the matchups that I have seen for Uzi, and there are a lot of them, this is one of the few that I think actually works decently well for her. I don't think it's perfect, and I don't think it's, like, too deep. I don't know if I would say that this is my preferred matchup necessarily for Uzi, but I think this is one of the better ones, and I will take what I can get. I feel like it really has to emphasize the vibes and the tone. Like, it's very vibe and tone heavy, you know. You really gotta make sure you present the style correctly, but of course I think that could lead to it looking cool as hell. I think it's a super fun way to introduce both of these series. It's probably the easiest way to introduce both of these series, actually. I still find it hilarious that Black Widow Apocalypse has more, like, death battle related search results than, like, regular Black Widow Apocalypse search results, you know, or I guess Izzy has more death battle related search results than her own series. That's fucking insane to me. But clearly a lot of people do want her on death battle, and that is very cool. You know, I think it'd be very cool to get more, like, webcomic characters on death battle. And yeah, I feel like this one would have to be, this one would probably have to be 2D. I know people probably want to see, like, a 3D Murder Drones matchup, but, like, I doubt there's, like, a 3D model that exists for Uzi. I think they may have to make, like, a custom sprite or model for Izzy either way, I think. But probably 2D is the easiest way to do this one. I think that's what they would do. But it would be a very good looking 2D fight. Like, this would be, like, the coolest looking animation ever, I think. Again, as long as you do the style right, if you emphasize the tone and the vibes. I will say I'm not so sure about the debate. Not to think that I think it's bad, but, like, I just don't really know where Izzy scales. I know some of the Murder Drone scaling can get higher than you'd think. It's actually kind of insane how strong some of these Murder Drones characters can be, which I know is part of the reason why people don't like things like Uzi versus Blitz, right? From from Has Been Hotel, because it's just that one-sided, you know, so, which I totally understand. So I'm not so sure about that. I don't really know where Izzy scales, but at least conceptually, it might not be that deep, but it has enough of like the style and the themes, I think, to justify why it should happen. Like I said, when there's so many other Uzi matchups that I just don't really think work very well, I'm not going to be too picky. So I think this is one of the better Uzi matchups. I'm very happy about that. There's a lot of Murder Drones matchups that like, it seems like nobody can agree on whether or not they're good. Like I know there's N versus Penny, which a lot of people like. The one thing that I'm a little iffy about that one is the debate, but you know, I understand that there are a lot of people that do like that one. I decently like it as well. And I know Sin has a lot of matchups as well. A lot of people want to see Sin in the show, or see Sin on the show, but again, lots of different opponents that no one can really agree on who Sin should fight. But yeah, no, this is cool. If Death Battle were to do this, I think this would be such a cool way to bring both of these series onto Death Battle. That'd be awesome. So like I said, this I think is this is about the halfway point. So hope you guys are having fun. I hope you guys haven't dipped out too quickly. I can drink more of my water than I think. I just want to pace myself because I remember one stream I had too much water too early, and I was thirsty for the rest of it. I just don't want to go too quickly, but I think I think we're all good now. So now we have the False Promise. Yun versus Tai Lung, Avatar versus Kung Fu Panda. A character that had great potential as a child and told by their masters that they will be something great, Avatar and Dragon Warrior, but ended up not and going on a rampage, but they end up meeting and getting defeated by the real Chosen One. Thumbnail made by Soul. Thank you so much, Soul, for the thumbnail. That looks really good. So I've seen, here's the thing with Avatar versus Kung Fu Panda matchups. I feel like because there are so many of them that have been made, I feel like this is one of those instances where I kind of feel like we should be prioritizing debate a little bit more, assuming that like a lot of the connective tissue is in the fight dynamics are about equal with each other, because there are some of those that I just do not think are that debatable, like Oogway versus Iroh. As cool as a concept as that is, that's one where you're looking at like a very top tier Kung Fu Panda character versus like, not a very top tier Avatar character, right? I'm trying to say in the nicest way possible. So that's one where I kind of feel like, we can probably find something better than that, right? I've seen people try to argue that Aang versus Poe is debatable, and I can understand maybe through some interpretations it can be, but of course now with Aang fighting Traveler, I don't know if we're going to see Aang versus Poe for a while, if at all. This one I think is probably on the better side, just because like they're neither of them are at like the top of their food chains, and it's very interesting to see like where they would scale, amongst their own series. Like I feel like some people might even be thinking like, where the heck do they scale? And it would be up to Death Battle to answer those questions, right? So from that point alone, I do think that like this could be considered one of the better ones just from a debate perspective. Of course, though, I have seen a lot of Azula versus Tai Lung as well. That's one that I think a lot of people throw around for a Tai Lung versus Avatar matchup. And that's another one where I think, you could argue that the debate, fluctuates to more of an acceptable level. I think Tai Lung versus Azula would have a more interesting discussion behind it, and I think it has the potential to be flashier. But if I'm being honest, this Yun does feel more like the Tai Lung of Avatar. You know what I mean? Like, Azula does have some connections with Tai Lung, but if we're trying to say, like, who does Tai Lung actually mirror the most from Avatar as far as, like, an arc perspective and a character perspective, I think this actually makes more sense, right? Because, again, the false promise, right? Like, that idea and the themes of, like, false destinies and all that. Like, I think that does hold the potential for a lot of cool writing, maybe some cool dialogue if they can find a way to work that in, right? So from that perspective, I do think Yun is more like the Tai Lung of Avatar. I also understand why there are people that would want Azula more, but I know there are also other Azula matchups. I could see people make the argument, just put Azula versus someone else, like Cinder, that a lot of people also don't like, right? So people are always going to complain about matchups, right? So for both of them, I can understand the idea behind both of those ideas. Like I said, just from a sheer sheer connections perspective, this does feel like the most appropriate one for Tai Lung from Avatar. But I can see some people saying it's not like the flashiest, or it's not as interesting of a discussion. I've seen some people say that Azula versus Tai Lung is really similar to like a short range versus a long range combat. Like one of the characters is better long range, one of them is better short range, which I feel like is generally like a more interesting discussion. But again, just from a sheer like analysis and character perspective, this does seem pretty cool. And I think it would need a bigger emphasis on Krio as well, since again like Yun's powers aren't as flashy as Azula's. I don't think that's a bad thing. It just means that they have to make sure that they can do it well. Thank you, Santiago. If they're going to make Optimus Prime versus Ultraman, they have solid connections, giant alien noble warriors that transforms and are leaders of team of heroes that inspires future generations of heroes. And the track could be called The Light That Transforms. Thank you so much for the super chats. Let me give those a heart. Let me give those each a heart. Yeah, I mean, they do definitely have some workable connections for sure. Ultraman, I think, you know, it's weird to me that, like, Ultraman himself doesn't have, like, a really obvious idea. Like, I've seen, like, Godzilla versus Ultraman, I guess, you know, Optimus Prime versus Ultraman, but, like, I haven't seen a matchup for Ultraman that feels like it's, like, the one to rule them all, right? Like, one that feels really obvious above everything else. As far as Ultraman the series, though, again, I want to see Gohan versus Ultraman Zero. That's my big one, but, yeah, finding like a really good matchup for Ultraman himself would be nice. I can understand Optimus Prime versus Ultraman for sure, in some ways. But yeah, this is a cool idea. I think it really depends on what you want out of your death battles. If you really want like that solid connective tissue that focuses on choreography and has really like cool, like fun written analyses, I think Yun versus Tai Lung works well, but I also understand why there are people that might prefer Azula, because Azula is a fan favorite, right? Some people will prefer her just for that. But yeah. Thanks for the idea. Next up, Mystical almost did something bad on my phone. Mystical Investigators, Alexander Trece versus... Is Trece Trece? I'm going to say Trece. Alexander Trece versus John Constantine, DC. Both are powerful magic users who use mythology of their own respective series to learn and investigate supernatural mysteries, and both are somewhat detectives of the mystical arts, using power of stronger beings to help with their work. Thumbnail by me. Also watch the Trece series on Netflix. Yes, I am aware of that series. So just to get the elephant out of the room, or the elephant in the room out of the room, I guess. Yeah, obviously I like Constantine versus Raido. That is one of my most wanted death battles. I think it's weaseled its way into my top 50 at this point. I think that one is really cool. However, I will say that like Alexandra feels more like directly inspired by Constantine in a way. Like obviously Raido has some connective tissue with Constantine, but like I wouldn't be surprised if Trece took some really heavy inspiration from Hellblazer, just because they seem like way more like similar to each other, I guess. Like I think copy and paste is too strong of a word, but you know what I mean? Like they feel very, very similar to each other. Because I know that Trece started as a Filipino graphic novel, and I'm pretty sure it came out after Hellblazer and John Constantine was created, because I know he was created in the mid-'80s. And Trece, I think, was originally either the 90s or the early 2000s. So I wouldn't be surprised if they took some heavy inspiration from Constantine for that, because they do feel very similar. It's kind of funny. And I do think, though, there are some differences. Like, Constantine focuses more, I think, on, like, you know, summoning and the creatures that he has connections with, whereas Trece, I think, focuses more on, like, direct hand-to-hand combat. And I don't know if those two things are like weighted equally as far as like a battle to the death, if you know what I mean. Like I don't know if that's like the best matchup as far as their differences. Like I don't know if they hold equal weight as far as the debate goes. However, I do still think this is pretty interesting. I think there's a very fun story that can come out of it. I think the banter potential could be great. Anything with Constantine, I feel like the banter potential is amazing, honestly. And I think it could highlight the coolest cases that they've worked on, like the stuff that a lot of people know, like their most famous cases, but also the stuff that's crazier that people don't know about, that Death Battle just finds really interesting. Because I love it when it comes to like comic matchups like that, where they just bring up stuff that nobody knows about because they've done all that research, and they can say that, you know, yeah, we can bring it up because this is insane and no one knows about it, right? So that would be great. I do assume it's not that debatable. unless Trace really focuses on like really crazy cosmology. I'll be honest, I haven't seen the Netflix series. I know that it's like a mini series, right? There's not that many episodes. I guess I could watch it. I haven't seen that, and I haven't read much of the graphic novel. I've heard of Trace before, obviously. I don't know how many people in the chat have, but I've heard of Trace before. So I imagine it's not that debatable. But especially if it is debatable, I do see this as a decent alt for Constantine, just like from a conceptual point of view, because these characters are incredibly similar. And if it's not that debatable, I think I honestly might prefer just, again, like a comic crossover between them. Like, imagine them working on a case together, right? I know Constantine crossed over with Doctor Strange in the most recent Marvel DC crossover comics, but a crossover between these characters would actually be so much fun. This is now, I think, one of my most wanted comic crossovers, just because of how similar they are and their personalities bouncing off each other. Putting them in a death battle is probably the easiest way to have them cross over. But I think yeah, a crossover between them would be awesome. I still think Constantine versus Raido is my preferred for Constantine, partially because of debate reasons, partially just because, like, I think the dynamic is really cool. But I definitely see the vision here. There is definitely some cool stuff that could come out of this one. Just seeing the personalities bounce off each other would be a lot of fun. Next up, we have Super Villainy, Black Hat versus the Warden, Villainous versus Super Jail. Let me see if I can get everything in frame. There we go. Two top hat wearing, narcissistically crazed villains who've created and rule their own businesses. With their multiversal reality warping and shapeshifting powers, who will succeed in getting super, in getting villainous, and in getting the win? And fun fact, this was my pitched matchup I shared to the team. Okay, great for you. Good on you for that. And a thumbnail from the DBE blog. Okay, great for that. Do we have no, that's it. Okay. Yeah, we can take a look at this. Again, trying to make sure I fit everything in. Yeah, I like this idea a lot. I think I've said this on the channel before, but I definitely like this idea. I like it more than Alistair versus Black Hat, because I think while you could make the argument that matchup has like an unmatched level of personality, I think this matchup is close enough in that regard and way better in most other areas that is just better, you know? Like, if this one had like no personality to it, then maybe I would think differently, just because, again, it could be more like an Omni-Man versus Homelander situation where it still turns out to be like a good episode. But this is one where I think the personality is just close enough, and they have just so much better. It has so much better other attributes that I definitely want this one more than Alistair versus Black Hat. And thankfully, I think the chances for this one happening are better than before, because Alistair now has some other opponents that are being thrown around. Granted, I think that a decent amount of them also aren't very good, like Kane versus Alistair. I'm not really a huge fan of that. But of course, the Death Battle cast on that got like 1 billion views, so that one might just end up happening. But I am happy that, you know, even if Alistair kind of needs to get a bad episode because or a bad matchup because that's all he has, or a not amazing matchup more so. Because I don't think Alistair versus Black Hat is a bad matchup. I just think it sorely lacks in some pretty key areas. But if he has to get, you know, a pretty middle of the road matchup either way, I'd say we can at least save Black Hat for the Warden. I think that is way more appropriate for him in most areas. As far as anything else to say, like, again, like, I could talk about this matchup for a while, just most things about it I like. I think it has a very fun discussion. Again, the whole multiversal reality warping, they at least have, like, a similar scope of power, even if there is a generally agreed upon winner, so very appreciative of that. The fight potential, obviously it goes insane. You know, I mean, like, look at them. If they're that crazy and they're that, like, kind of like, Emperor Joker versus Goblin King. You know, you just have these characters doing the craziest stuff that you've never seen before, or have them incorporate things that they have done in their shows, right? But then also get creative, you know, take some liberties with it as well. I'd be really interested in seeing what the banter would look like, what the music would sound like. That's something I'd be interested in as well. I think it could have a really cool track. So yeah, I don't really have that much to say about it, just because I think it really is that well-rounded. I think this is the matchup for Black Hat. Before I was thinking, before I really knew about this matchup, I was like, oh, Death Battle is just going to do Alistair versus Black Hat because I don't see many other opponents being thrown around for them, and it just feels like, it vibes really well, like they just click really well together. But now that they do have more opponents, both Alistair and Black Hat has something as good as this is definitely the one I would want. And I would be disappointed if we got Alistair versus Black Hat over this, but it might happen. We'll have to see. But yeah, this is a really cool idea. I don't have that much to say about it. I just think it's really cool. I think it's very well-rounded, so that is great. Thank you, Santiago, for the super chat. Now that we're in the World Cup season, what are your football-themed matchups that could happen? Also, since they used Macho Man, they could use real football players and use all fiction they have, like make Messi versus Cristiano. I mean, I guess if they do have fictional stuff, like, I know the wrestlers have fictional stuff because they're wrestlers, like, that's kind of like what a lot of it is built around. I mean, I guess it depends on whether something is like official material, because then, like, what do you use? How do you decide what to use? Because I guess there is like fictional stuff that exists for them. I can't say I have any football or soccer related ideas, right? I prefer to call it football, but just to make sure people know what I'm talking about. I don't really have any football related matchups in mind right now. I'd be curious to see like exactly what the I'd be curious to see what the fictional stuff really looks like there, right? So I'm not 100% sure. But thank you again so much for the super chat. That is amazing of you. I know that I don't know what that currency is. I know it's not $200. I know it's like a matter of cents more so. But either way, I appreciate super chats regardless of what size they are, I will still make sure to read everybody's super chats. But yeah, really like Black Hat versus Warden. Really, really hope it happens someday. Next up, Energy of Light. Lloyd versus Takanuva, Ninjago versus Bionicle. Two protagonists of the biggest LEGO IPs, who started as weak children, but would grow up to stop the feud between the embodiment of good and evil. Like Black Hat versus Alistair, although Black Hat versus Warden, although even more so I think for this one. This is one I have brought up on the channel before. I remember I talked about this one. It wasn't in the most recent Death Battle Dream season. I think it was probably the Dream season before that one. I think it was the premiere for that season, actually. And yeah, there's a reason why it was on there. I really dig this one. I honestly think this is more interesting to me than at least most of Lloyd's other options. I know there's like Tommy Oliver, there's, you could say Luke Skywalker, either like Lego Luke Skywalker or regular Luke. I know there's a few other ones out there, but honestly, this one might be my preferred for Lloyd. I think it's a very cool idea. As far as anything like specifically, like, I feel like there might not be the greatest debate. And like, because I know that Bionicle gets like insane. I've heard a lot of people say that like, oh, Bionicle is just ridiculous, right? Well, what are people reacting to right now? What does that say? I'm on. I want to see what this says. Hang on. What are the reactions getting to? I'm on TV. Yes, you are, Forsetti. Thank you so much for your submission. This is the exclamation mark too. Yeah, no, I do dig this idea. I honestly do. Again, the debate is the one thing where I feel like it's really easy to pick on this matchup for, because I do know Bionicle scaling gets insane, and I don't think Ninjago quite gets up to that point. But honestly, this one is so unique as far as just how it would be presented and the kinds of characters that are being used, that this is one of those instances where I honestly don't really care that much. Especially since a lot of people, like a lot of the average people, don't know a lot about the Bionicle lore. Like, if this was something that was obvious to everybody, I'd be like, okay, maybe that's a bit much. But like, the average person, I think, would look at this idea and not have a single goddamn clue about like who would win this, right? Because they might know Bionicle, but they don't know a lot about the lore. Or even similar with Ninjago, they don't know how well Ninjago scales. I definitely collected more Lego than Bionicle. I think my brother and I each had like one main Bionicle. And I don't even know where they are. I think my brother's was somewhere, it might be in one of the drawers. I don't even know if mine is like, if I would even know where mine is. But we did have like one major Bionicle each when we were growing up. And as far as Lego, like I've watched some of Ninjago, and I've seen, I played a lot of the Lego video games, like the Star Wars Complete Saga, Indiana Jones, some of the Marvel and DC games, Harry Potter. even then I feel like there's more that I played. Yeah, played a lot of the Lego games, and collected a decent amount of Lego sets. Still have some of the complete ones like in my room, just on one of the shelves. So that's cool. But yeah, obviously I like Lego. And yeah, very specific hero's journey connections, which again, maybe not the most nuanced, but I think there is enough connective tissue there to really like sell why this is the comparison that should be made. And I would really like a Lego movie style animation, you know what I mean? Like not something that would look as good as the Lego movies because it's a movie. Like I don't think Death Battle could do that. I don't think they have the budget for that, but you know what I mean? Like something that kind of looks like it's stop motion, but is like it's either like, because what does the Lego movie do? Is it like CGI enhanced stop motion, or is it just CGI to look like stop motion? Regardless, either of those, like whichever one that is, if Death Battle could do this in that way where it looks like the physical toys fighting each other, I would love that. Absolute cinema. That would be so freaking cool of like an experiment to do, and this would be the perfect matchup to do that for. I would absolutely love it. It is probably my favorite Ninjago matchup. Otherwise, I might say Mikey versus Jay, but of course I want Old Man Logan versus Last Ronin more so. Although the TMNT versus Ninjago in general, like the four guys, you know, that's still cool. But this might be my preferred Ninjago matchup. It's hard to say. And I definitely want to learn more about Bionicle itself as well, because I know that, you know, the scaling gets crazy, but I still don't even know the most about it, right? So yeah, definitely would like a Death Battle just to highlight what these characters can do. So yeah, I still like this idea. If anyone was wondering, I still very much like this idea. Thank you for your submission. Now what do we have? We have Spock versus Mordin Solus, Star Trek versus Mass Effect. Sci-fi alien head scientists of a galactic crew traveling the stars who both value logic over emotion at first when it comes to making hard decisions. But through growing deep trust with their head captains, both would grow to understand emotion more and embrace their more emotion-driven side. So, what do I have to say about this one? You guys know that Spock is one of my most wanted characters to come into Death Battle, right? I feel like a lot of people already know that. There was in my not my most recent video, one of my more recent videos, top 10 most wanted new characters for Death Battle. Spock was number 2 on that list because, damn it, I really want Spock on this show. However, a Spock matchup is not in my top 50 most wanted Death Battles. And the reason for that is because I'm not trying to force a Spock matchup, right? Like, I have heard some Spock matchups, but I haven't heard any that I think are really, really good, or one that I feel like really fits for Spock, you know, like one that is so much better than all the others, because like I said, I choose my favorite matchups by how good the matchups are, with also my attachment to the characters, but like more so how good I think the matchup is rather than how much I like the characters or how much I really want a character on Death Battle. A lot of my favorite matchups involve characters I don't even really know that well, just because I like the concept of the matchup, right? However, with all of that being said, I think this actually is pretty cool. I think this is a cool-ass matchup for Spock, one that I had not seen before this was submitted. I don't know if this is being talked about in many other places, but damn, this actually feels like it could be a very workable matchup for Spock. For one thing, I feel like the dialogue here would be absolutely fantastic. Like, I like how both of these characters are very similar as far as the logical sides of their thinking, but there's also some minor differences. I know for both of them though, like they focus more on like the utilitarian consequentialist side of logic, where it's like, you know, they're not exactly pacifists, but they'll only use, you know, physical violence when they feel the ends justify the means, right? Like they won't use violence unless it's absolutely necessary, and they you know, again, at least at the beginning, yeah, they were focusing a lot more on the logical sides of their brain. So I really like how they do mirror each other in that way. So and I feel like that could really add into the dialogue, like seeing the subtle differences, like maybe them agreeing on things, but them also like disagreeing on like one or two things. You know, I think that would be very cool. The choreography I think would be a little tough here, but I feel like that's also going to go with like a lot of Star Trek matchups. I don't think we would have ships involved here, just because with, like, I don't really think you can have that work with the Enterprise, right? Like one person cannot, you know, work the Enterprise to its fullest capacity, you know? I guess you could argue we could use, like, the crews, but even then, like, each crew. But I don't really think that would be the most fair, though. Like, I feel like I would probably just prefer to keep it as these characters. I feel like you would definitely need to put more of an emphasis on the technology that they carry with them. And I would be interested in seeing the comparison of each of their technology. I'd be interested in seeing how Death Battle analyzes that. Mass Effect faces are something from another world. Damn right they are. Yeah, look at this guy. Look, if I can click on this. Yeah, you get a really good view of him. Can I? Yeah. Look at that. That's just funny. Yeah, like very different design compared to Spock, who again, Spock is half human, right? He's not full Vulcan, although most Vulcans still pretty well look like that, so that doesn't even really matter. But yeah, that's really funny. Yeah, I would like to see a comparison of like the tech that they carry on them and seeing like which is better, you know, which overall scales higher. So I gotta be honest, this, just based on the other matchups that I've seen, this is a strong contender for my preferred for Spock at this point, just because I don't really know if I could have said I had one before, like a really solid one. I feel like there might be a bit of a tonal clash here, but like I said, I feel like that does go for a lot of Star Trek matchups. There aren't a lot of series that feel like Star Trek feels, if that makes any sense. So I've kind of just come to accept it that like a lot of matchups aren't really gonna have that, which is perfectly fine. I still think this matchup works on a lot of other cool ways. I think the arc connections, like the arc-based connections of, you know, them understanding their emotion more makes up for the fact that like Mordin Solus isn't like a half-blood or like half-human, because normally I think I would want maybe like another half-human character, but the understanding the emotional side more is kind of where that comes from, right? So I think that kind of makes up for it, that they still have something like that to fall back on as far as their connections. So at the very least, I can say that this is a sensible, workable matchup for Spock. And I'm still going to be looking around. I'm still going to be seeing if there are other Spock matchups that I like. But I am happy to say that, like, I think I now have a matchup that works on all levels. And no offense to the people who have sent me Spock matchups, and I haven't given them like this amount of praise or anything. I do still appreciate, because there have been some people that tried pitching Spock matchups to me. But I think so far this is the one where I feel like it works the best with who Spock is, right? And keeps that sci-fi element and all that. So thank you, the Cosmic Drone, for this, because I feel like this is one I'm going to be keeping in my back pocket for a while. I don't know if it would ever happen, but I'm very happy to have seen it. Now what do we have? Trial by Thunder. Apollo versus Thor. Percy Jackson versus the MCU. Gods of the sky who get sent down to Earth by their fathers and eventually become better people. MCU Thor specifically because Thor has a defined character spread for his comic counterpart, but MCU Thor has way better debate, connections, and themes. I can definitely agree with you for a lot of that, especially as far as the debate and the themes. I think that definitely works a lot better in this matchup's favor than if you were trying to use like comic book Thor versus like Percy Jackson Apollo. I guess I was even about to say, or even comic Thor versus like Greek god Apollo, but then you'd probably just do like Norse god Thor versus Greek god Apollo, and yeah, the connections definitely don't work as well there. I do definitely think that as in most areas, yes, this does kind of work the best as far as making a sensible matchup. Thank you for the, I can't, is it just Fez? Thank you, Fez. Am I reading that right? For the $2, thank you. To this day, I am shocked that Death Battle has never touched Trek. Yes, I am shocked as well. Like, Captain Kirk versus Han Solo is so easy, right? Like, it's a Star Wars character that you can fall back on if you really don't have a lot of faith in Star Trek. But Star Trek has been making a comeback these days. Like, there was a time like in the early 2000s when Star Trek really was not popular at all because there weren't any shows coming out for it. We're getting more Star Trek content than we've really ever gotten at a single time. Maybe you don't like the new Star Trek stuff. I know there's some people that don't like it. I think some of it is good, but some of it can be hit or miss. But Star Trek is getting more popular again. Like, come on, guys. I know maybe it's not Spock himself, although Spock is in the the Strange New World show pretty prominently, and he was in Discovery a little bit. I mean, I'm just going on a Star Trek ramble at this point, my god. But yeah, no. Even still, Captain Kirk versus Han Solo is too easy. Why haven't they done that one? It's so weird to me. Or Q versus Mixie, that's another one I really want, although I don't know if I have as much faith in that one. But anyway, back to this one. So, yeah, I do agree that this is the better version of this matchup in a lot of different ways. I do feel like a battle between, like, adaptations of gods is a fun idea. Like, again, the MCU version of a Norse god and the Percy Jackson version of a Greek god. Although I guess this would be, MCU Thor would be more an adaptation of an adaptation, because it's MCU is an adaptation of the comics, which is an adaptation of the Norse myth. But again, I do think this version of this fight is better than like Percy Jackson, Apollo versus comic Thor or anything. I definitely think this works better. I do think it has good themes of like learning what it means to be a god. Like with Thor, it's more, you know, specifically what it means to be a hero, like not just a warrior, but a hero. But Apollo still has similar themes of like learning what to do with the power that you have and becoming a better person, not just, you know, a deity who does whatever the hell you want, right? So I do feel like there is good enough connective tissue there. It is nice themes that could add to the writing. I think it could have a really fun animation. It might be a little tricky as far as the sprites they would use. I don't think Death Battle would just use like the Thor sprites they've used before, because I feel like people wouldn't really want that. I think they would want a more like MCU-like Thor sprite to represent that better. I don't know if that already exists or if Death Battle would have to make that themselves. And Apollo, even if like a major Percy Jackson sprite exists, I'm not so sure if Apollo has one. This is another one where they definitely have to make like custom stuff for it. But I think if they can get that down, then this could look so cool, because it's a godly battle, right? Like that could look really awesome. And Percy Jackson is a most wanted series for me to come onto Death Battle. That's one I really want. Of course, that's mostly for Percy himself, but I don't mind hearing other Percy Jackson matchups. There's Nightcrawler versus Nico D'Angelo, which I've been getting a little more into, you know? So that's really cool. So other Percy Jackson representation is cool to see. And I think the MCU is something that could realistically get its own episode. I know it's not quite as prominent as it used to be, arguably, but the MCU is so synonymous with cinema at this point that it's not like when I see someone saying, oh, we can use like this cartoon version of this superhero or this, where I'm like, not everybody watched that cartoon. You do realize that, right? Like there'd be people kind of confused. But stuff like the MCU and the Super Friends, like when they did Super Friends Aquaman, like I feel like using like the really big stuff, like the stuff that kind of like everybody knows. I think we could definitely see versions of heroes that come from stuff like that. So it's like the Super Friends Aquaman, because that was like a huge meme. Everyone knows that that's where like the whole Aquaman sucks notion came from. And yeah, just the MCU version of a character, of a prominent enough character, I think also does work and is very feasible to get an episode. And it would excuse Thor coming back as opposed to comic Thor getting a fourth separate matchup, you know, like, because that would be insane. I would not take this one over, say, like Zeus versus Odin. That is still one of my most wanted death battles. That's like the normal Greek god versus Norse god. Like that's still like the mythical matchup I want the most. But this is still cool. This is a pretty cool idea, just comparing two different adaptations of gods that happen to go through similar things. Because, you know, because they're not really like the gods of the same thing. Like you could say like Apollo's like the god of light, whereas Thor's the god of thunder and lightning. Like there is some weather elements there, but they really don't have a lot in common as far as what they're the gods of. But like focusing more on what they've gone through is pretty cool. So yeah, I hadn't heard this one before either, but that's really interesting. Now, what the hell do we have here? Twilight Sparkle versus Meggy Spletzer, My Little Pony versus SMG4. Female protagonists that were newcomers from another city, Inkopolis and Canterlot, who currently live in a place with weirdness, Equestria and the Mushroom Kingdom. Developed a major change, Twilight becoming Alicorn and Meggy becoming human, and both find friendship pointless, but as they continue, they appreciate the friends they made. Thumbnail by Impressive Drive. Technically, you could argue that that Twilight also became human, at least temporarily, right? Like the Equestria girls and all that. So that's kind of fun as well. But yes, they did go through changes regardless of that or not, you know, with that or not. Thank you, Mr. Goodies, for the $5. Oh, Raptor, also, I will pay you to watch the villainous shorts. I don't care. How much are we talking? No, I'm kidding. You don't have to do that. That is something I might get to. I mean, I guess theoretically, if you, like, for more super, like, I will do what super chats say, but I don't want to put, like, a price on it or anything. I assume you're more so joking. But that is very nice. Thank you for the super chat. I might give it a try at some point, because it does sound pretty interesting. So thank you so much for the super chat. That is very kind of you. But yeah, talking about this matchup. So this is not the most popular SMG4 stuff that I've seen. Obviously, I've seen more so like Mr. Puzzles, whether it's versus Vox or versus Kane. I've heard Kane versus Mr. Puzzles as well. You know, I think I lean a bit more towards Vox versus Mr. Puzzles, but, you know, I still have heard both of them. And I've also just heard SMG4 versus Devil Artemis, you know? So definitely not the SMG4 matchup that I've seen the most. But I think I have seen it before a little bit, surprisingly. And this is another instance, kind of like Alexandra Tresse versus John Constantine, where looking up what these characters have in common as far as their origins and their personalities, I honestly wouldn't be surprised if Meggy actually took, or if SMG4 took a lot of inspiration from Twilight when making Meggy's character. I don't know if that's been confirmed or if that's completely off the mark or anything, but just based on the limited stuff that I know, I am kind of getting that impression, which is really funny because, yes, as far as like their origins and their personalities, they do line up surprisingly well there, which is really cool. You know, from a personality perspective, they do definitely have a lot in common in that way. It's a very distinct vibe, more distinct than I think a lot of other Twilight matchups that you can put her in. And I think if nothing else, like it's an excuse to show off the highest scaling for these characters, right? Because I think we can agree that aside from maybe Bill Cypher versus Discord, we really haven't seen the highest stuff that My Little Pony can show off from Death Battle's analyses, right? And with SMG4, I know they can also get some pretty crazy scaling too. So really what I would be interested for this is this having an excuse to like share the highest stuff that both of these series can do. Of course, though, it is possible for Death Battle to just cherry pick the feats that they want to use, that they still feel highlights the differences that they've, you know, come to, or the conclusion they've come to based on their larger research. But really what I would want is for them to like show off exactly how strong these characters can get and the highest scaling that we can see from these characters in these series, right? That's what I would be most interested in for something like this. I am a little curious how the abilities play off of each other, though. Mostly in the sense of, like, I know Twilight has a lot of magic that can kind of just end a fight right away, you know, in most cases. So I feel like Meggy would either need to have very similar abilities or, you know, specific resistances that would allow her to stay in the fight more, you know? And maybe she does have that. But if she doesn't, and it is the kind of thing where Twilight kind of just wins because, you know, because of her magic, then again, that would kind of kill the matchup a little bit for me if there's not really a discussion to be had here. But maybe Meggy does, just by virtue of being a character from SMG4, maybe just by her nature of being from that series. Maybe that's true. Maybe she does have some really crazy abilities. But I would definitely like to know more about that debate. Because I feel like that is something that could either elevate my interest in this or you know, kill it just a little bit, you know? But so I'm curious to see how those abilities play off of each other and whether or not that makes a really good dynamic and a good discussion. I feel like Death Battle may go a different route if they ever do decide to put SMG4 on the series. Like, I don't think they're ever going to do SMG4 versus Devil Artemis, though, to be honest. Like, I feel like this is more likely than that. But again, I could see Mr. Puzzle showing up at some point, whether it's like Vox or Kane or someone else. But yeah, so they might do something different with SMG4, but like, I honestly, I don't hate this one. I'm pretty, not that I was expecting to hate it, but it is a pretty out there idea from what I've seen, but I definitely understand that, like, they do feel like almost the same kind of character, just from two very different worlds. What else do we typically see for Twilight? Is it like, who's that character from Winx Club that I think people put Twilight against? I think it's Bloom. I think that's the one. I've seen Twilight versus Bloom a little bit before. But this is definitely interesting. It's less about, you know, the whole like magical series for girls connection. It's more about, I think, just the way these characters, you know, conduct themselves and the arcs they've gone through, you know, so that's pretty interesting. I definitely respect connections like that, you know, so yeah, really, really interesting. Next up, Joseph Joestar versus Batman. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure versus DC. Joseph Joestar and Batman both beat stronger opponents by outthinking them, relying on deception, mind games, and quick decisions. It's really a clash of strategy versus improvisation, where intelligence and adaptability matter more than strength, with both using tools, skill, and their surroundings to gain the upper hand. So, unfortunately, this one is kind of fighting an uphill battle for me as far as me, like, really getting behind it. Partially due to the fact that I don't really think we need Batman on the show ever again. I don't know if Death Battle is going to do that. I feel like they may eventually bring him back for something. But he's just been on the show too many times at this point. As much as I love Batman, I do not see the need to bring him back for yet another Death Battle. So that's part of it. Joseph Joestar, on the other hand, is one of the characters that I really want to see on Death Battle. He's another one of my most wanted characters for Death Battle. I've gone on record saying there are a number of opponents he could fight that I would actually be pretty decently happy with. I might still have a hierarchy generally, but like there's a lot of opponents where I'd be very interested to see how Death Battle would do it. Joseph versus Batman, I will say, is not usually on that list, though. Usually Batman is not one of those characters I'm thinking of when it comes to who Joseph could fight. I do think that the contrast of intelligence is pretty interesting. I understand the hope for more, like, you know, intelligence-based battles, but I do feel like saying, you know, they both use their intelligence, but the contrast is how they use their intelligence. You know, I feel like you can just say that with any intelligence-based characters or intelligence-based matchups. Like just saying, oh, they use their brain a lot, but they use it in different ways, and that's what makes it interesting, you know? Like, I feel like you can say that for so many different characters where the main thing they use is their brain. And you could argue for Joseph, like, that's just one of the many things he uses. I guess for Batman as well, too. But I feel like when it comes to intelligence-based matchups, like where that's a big emphasis, I would want something where the intelligence itself overlaps a little bit more, because at that point, like, where do you stop? You can just pick two intelligence characters, like two really smart characters, and say, well, they think differently, therefore let's make it a matchup, you know? I feel like you can kind of go a little off the rails with that. But I still understand the idea of wanting a more intelligence-based idea, like more intellect-based animation and describing more so their intelligence in the analyses, although we've seen that with Batman quite a few times before. I don't know if I would say this matchup necessarily emphasizes their other traits as well, though. Like, again, I feel like maybe if their ways of intellect were more if their ways of intellect were more similar, then maybe they could their other attributes could be highlighted a little better as well, because it also doesn't seem like they have the most amount of connections. Again, just saying that they're smart, but they're smart in different ways, and that's like the main thing they have in common. Again, to me, that's not really what I want in my death battles. I usually want a little bit more. In fact, like, usually when I think of like Joseph Joestar's style of intelligence, I think more so, to me, it's closer to Spider-Man than it is Batman. And I've heard Batman versus Spider-Man. No, Batman versus Spider-Man. I've heard Joseph versus Spider-Man thrown around a bit before. That's another one that's not really on my most wanted, my most wanted death battles, or my most wanted Joseph matchups. But, you know, that one's, if Death Battle went with that one, I guess it'd be fine. Like, it would bring Spider-Man back again. But there are still other ones that I think work better for Joseph, just personally. The one thing I will say is that this actually has the potential to give Batman a funny episode. Like, I think bringing Batman back for Batman versus Iron Man made a lot of sense, because you were looking at basically a completely different character as far as what you were analyzing, right? Because you were giving him a bunch of other stuff. So that, I think, is a good reason to bring Batman back, even if he was coming back, you know, for his 4th episode. This would give Batman potentially a funnier episode, which I think, you know, you can make the argument that we want to give Batman a funny episode, so let's bring him back again, right? But that's like the main thing that I would probably get out of this episode, just seeing how funny it could be and how entertaining it could be in that way. Not exactly my cup of tea for my Joseph matchups, but if you like it again, that's okay, no worries there. We're all gonna like different things in our matchups. There's just too many other Joseph matchups that I think I would prefer. But I totally get wanting more intellect-based stuff, right? And having some differences in the way they think is definitely good, but trying to base a whole matchup around the idea that they are smart, but they're smart in different ways. Again, I just feel like there's so many characters that are smart. By that logic, you can pit like any two smart characters together, and that's not usually the way I like to think about my matchups, you know? Replace Batman with Spider-Man versus Joseph. Thank you, Ranger Forever, for the super chat. Yeah, like I said, I feel like the intelligence-wise, Joseph does line up a little better with Spider-Man than Batman. Although there are still other Joseph matchups I think I would prefer more than Spider-Man. But I do still want Peter to come back. Don't get me wrong, I definitely do. But yes, thank you, Ranger Forever, for the super chat. I don't know how much that is because it's in a currency I don't know the exchange rate for, but either way, again, regardless of how much you guys submit, regardless of how much you guys you know, super chat, I appreciate it all the same. Thank you so much. You guys have been incredible with the super chats. It's amazing. But yeah, moving on. Tales of Skulls and Swords, or Tale of Skulls and Swords. Nightmare versus Marie Corbell, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Soul Calibur versus Skullgirls. Fighting game bosses who, following a personal tragedy, became the vessels of ancient evil artifacts that promised them the power to seek justice. They raise an army of monsters and go on a rampage, righteous fury and bloodlust blinding them to the heartless monsters they become. Holy shit, what a description. Thumbnail and track art by me. I hope it looks good. Well, let's first see the track. Yeah, we haven't seen too many track arts. Unless I've just been missing them, I don't think I have. But holy, yeah, that looks good. Tale of Skulls and Swords. You have like the two arms holding on to like the, you know, the different looking soul edge. That's pretty cool. Only thing I would say is that maybe just like I like the background color. Maybe just like extend it all the way to the top of the file, because it just looks like black for like I want to say like a quarter of the image. But otherwise, yeah, this looks really cool. I really like the way it's drawn. Very, very cool. But yeah, going back up to this one. Let me get a drink of water before I actually start talking about this. So, we have seen Skullgirls on this series before. In a very similar way, actually. I think it was Annie of the Stars versus Toshiro from Bleach. And I see this matchup as very similar in the sense that, like, I feel like these are two series that feel like they should get on Death Battle, right? Or they feel like, well, in Soul Calibur's case and in Nightmare's case, it feels like they should get a return to Death Battle, but it feels like Death Battle should be giving these series more than what they have gotten. Skullgirls, how the hell do we not have a Skullgirls episode? It really, that kind of blows my mind as well. That's like, in my opinion, one of the biggest mainstream fighting games where it's like, how do we not have one? How have we gone this whole time without getting a single episode? And arguably, Soul Calibur deserves like more representation or more of a redemption, I guess, on Death Battle, even more than Bleach, because Bleach's original 2 episodes, both of which were after Soul Calibur's original 2 episodes, and especially now that Bleach has come back, you know, with Ichigo versus Yusuke, Soul Calibur definitely feels like the series that deserves to come back in some way. And you can do it with Nightmare, or you can do it with a different matchup, like, what is it? Spinal versus Cervantes. I think that's the one that a lot of people still talk about. So I definitely would like to see Soul Calibur come back to Death Battle and Skullgirls get a matchup in general. So this matchup kind of serves both of those purposes. So that's already a good thing right off the bat for me. And I've seen the whole, like, you know, corrupted villains thing before, like with, you know, Sauron versus Lich King. Hell, I've seen, like, Sauron versus Nightmare before. Maybe even Lich King versus Nightmare before. Like, I have seen that before because that's just a very common trope in these kinds of media. But I think that these two characters being, like, specifically fighting game bosses, like video game fighting game bosses, and that adding that context brings a very cool flavor to it that maybe you wouldn't get from like Sauron or Lich King, you know, and trying to stick one of them with Nightmare. I think incorporating their combos and like their signature moves into the animation while also taking some liberties with the choreography, like having a good mix of all of that, I think would be very fun to watch during the the animation. And the whole like raised armies concept, that's always fun. You know, you can incorporate that into the animation as well. And you know, the evil, the magical, the spooky elements that come together, like I feel like that's a really fun tone, a really fun vibe to bring to the animation. I feel like it wouldn't be 3D though, which is the kind of thing, unless there's like there are really good 3D models for Skullgirls. I don't know if those exist. One of the things that I would probably want for bringing Soul Calibur back is giving it a 3D episode, for obvious reasons, right? Like, I feel like it kind of deserves a 3D episode, and I just feel like this probably wouldn't do that. But it would still give Nightmare another chance to shine, and, you know, for Death Battle 2, maybe go a little bit deeper in showing how strong he is, all of his powers, you know, the highest scaling he can reach, you know, so that's nice. And yeah, I don't know, like, this would be an interesting first, like, an introduction to Skullgirls, but I would go with it. You know, they've done stuff like that before with, like, Beerus versus Sailor Galaxia. That was a very interesting way to introduce Sailor Moon onto Death Battle, but I think it worked pretty well. So yeah, I don't have many other like opponents in mind for either of these characters. But as it stands right now, I think this would be pretty interesting. I think this would be a cool idea. Again, the fact that they're fighting game bosses and, you know, you can incorporate a lot of their signature moves into the animation, I think definitely elevates it from like other characters you can pit them against where it's just like corrupted villains. So I definitely like that. Maybe a bit of a tonal clash, but maybe just as far as the art style, as far as like the actual tone itself, I feel like it can be pretty consistent within itself. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Again, I would really like a 3D Soul Calibur episode, but that doesn't mean I'm going to say no to this one, unless it can be done in 3D. But again, I don't know if the proper models exist for something like Skullgirls. So I don't know, but this is a cool idea. And again, very, very well done track art. Oh, we have more track art down here. We will get to that after we read this. Night Runners, Okaroon and Ko Yamari? I'm not sure. I should have double checked this before. But Okaroon versus Ko Yamari, Dandadan versus Call of the Night. Two protagonists that for most of their lives were lonely teenagers who couldn't make real connections with other people, causing them to struggle mentally and emotionally. We've all been there. This changes when they step outside their comfort zone and meet a girl they slowly fall in love with. Thanks to her, they were finally able to build genuine friendships, and at the same time they were pulled into the supernatural world, gaining powers, and finally found a new meaning and joy in their lives. Good for them. Thumbnail and track art by you. Very well done on both. Let's take a look at this. Holy crap, this looks great. Oh, this is another... Maybe is this the way that the... Because I'm just noticing this is like the same background, the same like black is being cut off. So maybe this is more like a template that people have been given. Unless these two just happen to use like the same style of like background and stuff, but I feel like it has to be more of like the template that was given. If so, that makes a lot more sense as to why there was just some black cut off. But yeah, holy crap, look at it. Oh, I love the crack of the glasses that's being made by the teeth. That's so cool. Very, very cool. I like this track art. That is awesome. Thank you to Candy Sensei for the super chat. Got my next matchup ready for the next Ballot Banter. That's great. Yes, again, if you are a new member, if you just became a member through the gifted memberships, or if you bought a membership, or, you know, if you're already a member and you're in the Discord, yes, be sure to get your next ballots ready. I will make sure to reopen this chat either later today or sometime tomorrow. So after the stream is done, you might not be able to do it immediately. You're definitely not able to do it right now. But rest assured, you will, if you become a member and you join the Discord, you will be able to do it in due time, okay? And you'll have a lot of time to do it. You have like 2 months to do it. So so no rush as well if you want to spend more time on that. But thank you so much, Candy Sensei, for the super chat. Thank you as always. So Okaroon versus Ko. So the big matchup I think that's being thrown around for Dandadan right now is Okaroon and Momo versus Cloak and Dagger, which is one that I've actually gotten a little more into lately. That one was on last year's fan-made Tournament of Champions that we did as a live stream last year, so that's cool. I have seen a few matchups just for Okaroon himself. Most notably, I think, is Mob. Mob from Mob Psycho 100, I think, is the one I typically see for Okaroon.
As far as this one, though, I think I've seen this one around a little bit. Again, though, just not as much as Mob. But I do like the concept with this one, kind of like the supernatural introverts, right? Or the introverts that were not only taken outside of their comfort zone, but put into a supernatural world. Like, that's always a fun concept, right? The connections kind of feel a little similar to something like, I don't know, like Yuji versus Denji or Eren Yeager versus Ken Kaneki. Like, the connections may not be like the deepest, but like you kind of just have like a single line that describes exactly why these characters are being paired together, and it works really well. So I do think the core theme and the connections work for these characters. I think it makes for a very fun dynamic, a very fun tone that could permeate throughout the entire episode. And I like how the romance is emphasized here. That's not something you get in the same way with like Okarun versus Mob, right? Like, I like how these are from primarily like, you know, supernatural romance anime. Again, similar to like Yuji versus Denji, where it's like just the series themselves feel very similar to each other. I like how that also applies here. Let me scroll up a little bit. I feel like we're getting some of that cut off. Yeah. I like how that really applies here as well. I think that really elevates this as a matchup for Okarun. Thank you so much, Santi, for the super chat. Hi, Raptor. That one is my submission. I want to add that the battle is pretty debatable, at least in my opinion. I also want to apologize for writing too much. It's just the matchup means a lot to me. I don't even know if you wrote too much. Usually I say it's 50 words or less, I think is what I say. I don't know if I didn't count them. This looks fine to me, though. It's okay. Don't worry about it. I have no worries with that. But thank you so much for your submission. Let me give that a heart. Yeah, I'll talk about it in just a second. But thank you so much for that. Joseph, thank you so much. Siga Smith. Joseph vs. Batman is more about improv using surroundings versus prep, gear, tools, gadgets, etc. And they also both use ancient Tibetan monk techniques. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's really cool. Thank you so much for the super chat. I appreciate that. Yeah. There's definitely some cool things about Joseph versus Batman. Absolutely. The way that their intelligences can kind of like bounce off of each other is very cool. And yeah, some intelligence differences are better than some other intelligence differences, right? So I'll definitely give you that. But yeah, thank you guys so much for the super chats. You guys are great. Yeah, with just going back to this one for a second. Yeah, so one thing I was actually going to say is that I'm not sure about the debate. Not in the sense that, like, you know, I think it's one-sided. I just literally have no idea, like, where these characters scale versus each other. Obviously, I'm just taking your word for that as far as you know, whether or not it's debatable. But sounds like it actually could have an interesting discussion behind it, so that definitely helps. The art styles, I feel like the blend of art styles could be really cool. I know that these series came out like around the same time, right? Or the anime at least came out around the same time, like early 2020s or something, if I'm getting that right, or just sometime within the 2020s. So the quality of the animation is probably around the same, but like I still think there's enough differences in their art styles to make a really cool combination of like the supernatural elements they bring to it, and seeing how that all works together. And also seeing their personalities grow, like describing that over the course of the analyses, but also maybe kind of reflecting that in the animation as well. Like maybe they start off a little more introverted, a little like more restrained, but then as the battle goes on, you know, with that sweet progression and escalation, that kind of gets reflected in the animation too, just like how they've grown as people. That sounds really cool. And as far as anything else, yeah, probably like the easiest intros you can make for both of these series simultaneously. I feel like you can still talk a lot about, you know, Okarun's relationship with Momo, even if Momo isn't in the battle itself, like Okarun and Momo versus Cloak and Dagger. I mean, you kind of have to talk about that because, again, the romance is really heavily emphasized here. So that's really easy to do. So honestly, I think at the moment, this would probably be my preferred for just Okarun. I'm not sure about if it would just be like if I would like it necessarily over Okarun and Momo versus Cloak and Dagger, but I see those as two very respectable ways to get Dandadan onto the show. It's kind of like just pick your poison. Do you want just Okarun or do you want Momo there too? And then you have a really solid matchup for either of those. So honestly, yeah, I think this is a pretty solid idea. I really like it as one for just Okarun. So that's really cool. I think how many do we have left? I think we have like 3 left. Okay, we're making good time. I'll probably stay on stream until around 4-ish. even if we finish before that point, because like it's still fun to just talk to you guys. Again, sorry I haven't been able to focus on the chat that much, but again, with something like this where I really need to make sure like I'm keeping track of my time, I can't look at the chat so much, you know. But of course, if you send a super chat, I'll be sure to see that because it's kind of right in front of my face, you know. But after we're done this, hopefully maybe I can talk a little bit more about just with like everybody, right? But there's still no slow mode because I know people get annoyed by that. Heavy is the head. Ice King versus the Witch Queen. Adventure Time versus Love and Legends. Crazy are the heads that wear these crowns. These two rulers of ice and snow are here to prove that they have what it takes to be the coolest one of all. The Witch Queen is a vile ruler who, upon putting on a cursed crown tiara thing, immediately setting out to conquer the world and bring about an endless night, using her powerful ice magic and seductive charms to do so. Ice King wishes that's who he was, then Finn and Jake teach him how to chill out and be a good friend. Really? Ice King wishes that he was seductive? Maybe. No, that's fun. That's really cool. Santi again, or is it Santi? Either way, thank you so much for the additional super chat. Season 2 of both series came out at the same time. Literally, they were airing at the same moment. Yeah, exactly. Like I knew it was around the same time, but holy shit, that really is like the same time. That's really fun. Thank you again so much for your super chat. Yeah, thank you for submitting that idea. That was a really cool idea. I'm really happy I'm more aware of that idea now because I get the hype for it, I think. But anyway, yeah, Ice King versus Witch Queen. I gotta say, I did not know how many opponents Ice King had. I remember Ice King was on Death Battle Cast with, versus Lord Hater, I think it was. And I thought that was like, oh yeah, that's like his main matchup, right? It's gotta be. But we saw, Ice King versus somebody else. I remember, I think it was in the first Ballot Banter. I don't remember exactly who it was though, but I remember Ice King we had versus a different character in the first Ballot Banter, and now we have Witch Queen, and there are other characters I've seen thrown around, so I did not realize how big Ice King's spread was. A lot of people clearly want him on the show. That's really awesome. I'm not too familiar with Love and Legends. I know what it is. I know that it's like a video game, like, but it's like a visual romance novel sort of thing where it's like, it's kind of like a choose your own adventure thing where like you make choices and you can like romance characters and that leads to like further events in the story. I know that's the kind of thing that it is, as opposed to it being like a normal like combative game. Like it's not like a fighting game or anything like that. I'm aware of that. So I feel like while there might not be like a lot of combative play in the series or in the game, I feel like from my understanding, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong on this, there is still combat that exists in the game, but it's more like a result of the choices you make. Like there are characters within the game that are still very much capable of fighting, even if like you as the player are not like controlling the player to fight. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? That's kind of what I'm getting from this, if I'm understanding correctly. And if that is the case, I don't see that as a negative for this matchup. I don't think, because as I've said before, you know, as we talked about like lore, I feel like what a character is confirmed to be able to do is what should be analyzed for a death battle, whether you're controlling the character to do that or not. You know, just what's in the gameplay is not everything that the character is, right? The lore is also as much of the character, because it's not about the character's relationship with the player, it's about what the character themselves can do, right? The character themselves can do. So even if that is the case for Witch Queen, where it's more about like, you know, the story that's being told through your actions results in the combat and the feats, as opposed to you actually like controlling the combat, I think that's perfectly fine. I don't have an issue with that. Still not really sure where Witch Queen would scale though. Got no clue about that. But it does seem like a really fun idea. I think the connections are fine. I think it has a good personality. I will say though, this last bit about describing who the Witch Queen is and then saying that's who the Ice King wishes who he was, to me, that's not really the strongest connection, especially since it ends with him being different. Like, to me, that almost feels more like a contrast to me than like a really, you know, strong connection. I understand you could say that, like, the way they started, like, their motivations seemed very similar from the beginning, but especially with how, you know, Ice King's story ends, it feels like more of a contrast where it's like one character ended up like this, but the other character kind of ended up the opposite, right? So I wouldn't really call that like a strong connection personally. If anything, I see that as more of a contrast, but I hear you. I get the idea, like the general personality that this is going for. I feel like Death Battle may have to take some liberties for how the Witch Queen operates, or for how, like, because again, depending on how the combat looks in the visual novel, I feel like they may have to maybe up the ante. If they want to make like a really entertaining fight, they may have to have her doing things that maybe she, not that she's not doing in the visual novel, but like have her do it in like more visually appealing ways, like that's better for like a fast-paced animation, if you know what I mean. But you know, again, I'm not the most familiar with the with that visual novel series, or is it a series? I don't know. But I'm not too familiar with that. So maybe it does actually fit really well for like Death Battle style combat. Either way, I feel like they can do whatever they need to do in order to make it work. I think visual novels and stuff like that, as long as they still work well enough for Death Battle, could be viable for Death Battle. I don't think we should be shunning them. But yeah, Death Battle may have to take some liberties when it comes to series like that, as far as like how everything is presented, because they might not have the flexibility to present it in the same way that the visual novel does. You know what I mean? Like they may have to take some liberties there. So yeah, I think this one's all right. I think it's okay. I think Ice King does have some other very viable options, as I've said before. But just for the appeal of trying to get a visual novel on the show and trying to do something a little different, I get it. I think it's all right. I think it's a pretty all right idea. It's one of those instances where I would like to learn a little bit more about and like I can say this for a lot of matchups. I know probably you guys are tired of me hearing that, but again, when I get like nearly 30 matchups that I have to talk about in like, you know, 3 hours or less, I'm not going to be able to do the most amount of research on everything. I mainly just do the research so I have a more decent idea of like what I'm looking at. Like I needed to make sure I knew like exactly what Love and Legends was, right, before I looked at that. Because it would have been kind of unacceptable if I just had no idea even like what it looked like, the kind of series that it was, or anything, you know? So I just kind of, I make sure I do that before I look at everything, but I can't always, you know, go the deepest with that. I like how God is reacted at the bottom for this one. So getting close to the end, we have the ones all fear. Ain's Old Gown from Overlord versus Demi-Fiend from Shin Megami Tensei. Humans born from a different world, the protagonists of their stories, trapped in a chaotic place where they shall rise up. Build an army of many cohorts of varying magics and powers as they slowly grow to become the most powerful of them all, to become a being whose very name strikes fear in the hearts of their foes. This would be a Bowser versus Eggman styled character plus army battle. Yeah, I got you there. And thumbnail by Zero. Okay, thank you, Zero, for the thumbnail. So this is another one that I haven't really seen before. I've seen more so for Ain's Old Gown, like more like death-like characters or emperor-like characters. I think I've also seen like Ain's Old Gown versus Rimuru Tempest. I know that was one that was being thrown around a little bit before. But those are usually the kinds of characters I see paired up with Ain's. And for Demi-Fiend, I usually see I guess more like demonic-like characters like Ghost Rider or Spawn, you know, stuff like that, right? Where that's more so the emphasis that's being used here. One thing I have noticed when it comes to matchups for both of these characters, actually, though, is that most of them are not very debatable. I find that in most of them, Ain's is like very outclassed, and Demi-Fiend usually, just by virtue of being an SMT character, usually handles his matchups very, very easily. And honestly, this might be like the most extreme example of both sides, if I'm being perfectly honest. This feels like one of the most one-sided matchups that you can make for either of these characters, which is really saying a lot. Unless I'm really missing something about how Overlord scaling could work, I feel like this is actually like one of the most one-sided matchups you could attribute to either of these characters. And you can kind of argue that in both ways, right? You could be like, well, if everything's going to be one-sided, let's just like, it doesn't matter which one we use, even if it is really one-sided. But you could also be like, well, you know, you still want to get something that's relatively closer than others, right? If something is the most one-sided, then maybe you don't want to do that one, right? You'd still want something more or less one-sided, even if it's still not that debatable. You know, you can kind of take it either way. I do think it is kind of funny though, where at least out of the combatants that I've seen, this does seem to be like one of, if not the most one-sided one that I've seen for both of these guys, and that is saying a lot. But as far as the matchup itself, as far as in other ways, I think the origin-based connections are cool. I think always like having origin-based connections, but like having some major differences in their powers, as long as it can still have a good fight dynamic. I think that's always fun, because I think it makes it a little more unpredictable while still having a good amount of connective tissue there. So love to see that. I think this is a better Demi-Fiend choice if you want to have more of an army battle. I know that like he always has like an army that he can like, you know, summon or whatnot, like he can create, regardless of whether or not it is an army battle. But I do find like some of his other opponents like Ghost Rider and Spawn that I've seen, that's not really an army battle, that's just Demi-Fiend using his army in the 1v1 fight, right? Like that's kind of more so what that is. But if you want to have more of like a Bowser versus Eggman style character plus army battle, this is better for that. That is definitely better. Because it's one of the best ways that you can actually incorporate armies into that. For Ainzul Gaon, though, I wonder, I feel like just based on the matchups that I've seen for him, are there some matchups that don't include his army? I'm not 100% sure. Either way, it works really well for this. Like, that dynamic works really, really well for this. Saying for jokes, technically he has Dante Rido. Who does? Which one are you talking about? Are you saying are you saying for Ainz or for Demi-Fiend? Either way, I'm not sure if I've seen those. But thank you so much for the super chat, FloofySune. I know you're the guy who submitted this, so thank you so much. But yeah, I don't know who's being referred to there. But that is cool. Yeah. Well, of course, Dante we just had on Death Battle, and Rido. I just want to see Rido against Constantine, man. That's the one that I want. But yeah, as far as the army stuff goes, this does definitely work for that. You're saying Demi-Fiend. Okay, I gotcha. So Demi-Fiend versus Dante or Rido. I gotcha. But yeah, if you want an army fight, this definitely works. The mix of the undead and the demonic stuff, I feel like, you know, lends for a lot of visual potential, kind of like Ghost Rider versus Spawn. I feel like this is the kind of animation that could just go off in what it has in it, right? This is the kind of animation that could look absolutely awesome. As far as it being, like, as far as the matchup itself, again, I feel like whether you are looking at different kinds of connections or if you really just want to try to get something more debatable, I feel like there are other options for these characters. But it is the kind of thing where if Death Battle decided to do it, I'd be like, oh, so it's going to look awesome. You know, like that's not something I can deny either way, right? Like it's going to be something that looks cool either way. Like I said, though, a matchup looking cool is not enough for me to, you know, be fully on board with it. If there's not a lot of other stuff about it that I like, but I do think this matchup does have its own strengths. Again, the specific type of connections it has, I think that works. The army style of fight, I think that works. I think there is a decent amount that works here. But again, another one that I just have never heard before. It's cool to see matchups that I've never seen before. And I just get to talk about them without having any sort of bias of like what other people have said about them. That is really nice that I get to do that. And then we have what I believe is the last one. Yes, this is the last one that we have. Kirby versus Ditto, Nintendo versus Pokemon, copy and paste. It's simple, it's fun, and I think it would make for an entertaining episode. Thank you for the thank you for the short description. You can write a bigger description if you want, but thank you for that. So yeah, Kirby versus Ditto. From my experience, not a lot of Kirby matchups are that strong as far as connections that I've seen. I think that when I try to think of a Kirby matchup that I really want, I try to lean more towards what's more interesting. You know what I mean? Like what's the most unique matchup we can find for Kirby if we can't really find one that's really strong as far as connections. I know that a lot of people like Kirby versus Mario. That's one that they want to see. But for me, that kind of goes on the other side of the spectrum for me, simply because I think Kirby versus Mario is just a worse version of Sonic versus Mario. That's just my opinion, though. You can disagree if you want, but for me, like, I just find, like, that to be like a more standard matchup for Kirby. Like, it doesn't really do a lot that we haven't seen on Death Battle before, you know what I mean? And I feel like Rimuru Tempest, while you could argue that she has other opponents that could work really well for her, I think as far as a Kirby matchup, that is way more unique. That is way more interesting as far as a conversation, as far as, you know, seeing how their powers would play off of each other. I think that is a lot more unique, just me personally. And because, again, I don't really think the connections are great either way, I tend to lean more towards what's more interesting, even though I like and know Mario way more than Rimuru. Because like I said, I don't judge these based on the characters I like, I judge it based on what I like within the matchups themselves. Kirby versus Ditto kind of feels like it's somewhere in the middle, where again, it doesn't feel like the connections are the strongest, but there is some interesting elements to it that I feel like we haven't seen exactly on Death Battle before. Like, we've seen copying stuff before, like Cell versus Metal Sonic, but the way this is done is still very different from the ways that copying works, you know. So I think, yeah, if Rimuru was to get a different matchup, I think this one could work quite well for Kirby. I know Death Battle was planning on doing this from the beginning, but then when they saw what Kirby was capable of, they switched Ditto out for Majin Buu. True story. As far as how the debate actually is, I feel like Death Battle at the time didn't really know the real story of like what Kirby or Ditto could do. I will say though that, like, I know there are some Pokemon that can get absolutely crazy. To my knowledge, Ditto is not one of them. Like, he's not one of the Pokemon that is doing things that is on the level of like the main Kirby cast, right? Because Kirby scaling is fucking nuts. And there's definitely some Pokemon characters where you could argue that it's around the same. I don't think Ditto is around that level though. From what I understand, I don't think Ditto is at that level, but I know some Pokemon can be surprisingly strong, especially by looking at the Pokédex entries. But yeah, so it's a simple idea, right? It's a simple idea, but it's a very obvious idea. Again, it's something Death Battle was considering right from the jump, even like really before researching the matchup. So obviously, it's a very obvious idea. Not all even like, again, like Rimuru versus Kirby, I would not say is the most complex idea either. So I think there's nothing wrong as long as there's enough other elements to make it work. I feel like a simple but obvious matchup, there's still a place for those on Death Battle. I think this is definitely one of them. I think also, though, the debatability could also depend on how their copying works. Like, would Ditto be able to, like, copy, like, the power level of Kirby through that? I'm honestly not exactly sure how Ditto's copying works. Because I guess theoretically, if the copying does work in a way like that, then we may actually have something. We may actually have a more interesting debate on our hands. But it would depend on how he scales and how his copying works and how that affects his power. I think that's really like the ways that this could potentially be debatable, right? Which may be true, you know? But it would be really crazy to see like what these characters can do in the analyses and the escalation and the animation. So overall, I wouldn't mind this. I don't have that much to say about it because, again, I think with a lot of Kirby matchups, it's really just about the vibes. Like, it's really just, does this one vibe to you? Does this one not vibe to you? Kirby versus Mario just doesn't really vibe the most to me. Rimuru versus Kirby vibes a little bit more. And Kirby versus Ditto, I think I understand why that vibes for a lot of people. If Death Battle did it, I wouldn't mind it. I think we would still be in for a fun time. Maybe not my preferred for Kirby, but if Rimuru was to fight someone else, wouldn't mind it. Really wouldn't mind it happening. And I think that's where we end it. Thank you guys so much for your ballot banters. Really love seeing your ideas. I know that when it comes to live streams, there's always a lot of rambling. There's always a lot of stumbling over words and whatnot. Again, I think there were 26 submissions for this, which is more than we've gotten before for any other ballot banter. Trying to keep enough stuff in my head this shit's hard. It's hard to say everything in a concise way. You know what I mean? I have a bunch of notes that can only help me so far. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. You know, still enjoyed my general thoughts. And of course, there's always more to matchups that I don't necessarily know. These are just my initial reactions. There's probably a lot for each matchup that you guys know that I don't, right? Because again, this isn't versus matchup review. The point is not really to review the matchups. This is just to give my initial thoughts, my initial vibes, I guess, towards them, right? So hope you guys still enjoy that. And again, if you're a member, you can submit and you will guarantee that your matchup gets shown off on the channel. So if you're interested in that, of course, there is the join button down below. You get your name written in pointing in the right way. Yeah, you get your name written down there in videos and streams and whatnot. So if you want that, or if you want just like members only streams, stuff like that, like a bunch of other perks, you can click the join button and see what's there. Or if you don't want to do it and you just want to watch, that's perfectly fine too. But of course, I always appreciate the extra support. Speaking of which, we got a couple more super chats. Let me heart those really quickly. The Killer Bean video game just got released. Just got released his early access, so we are getting closer to see Hank from Madness Combat versus Killer Bean, but still we are far because the game's not finished, and it should happen when it is finished. I've seen Hank from Madness Combat versus a few different characters, but I have also seen Killer Bean before, absolutely. Yeah, it might depend on how quickly Death Battle wants to use Hank. Because I know there are a lot of people that want Hank versus someone. Who do I normally see for Hank? Is that like I think I see like Hank versus Neon White. Am I getting that right? I feel like there's other matchups for Hank though that I've seen. Yeah, it would depend on when Death Battle wants to use Hank, I think, is how quickly they would get to that. And thank you, Kino. Ditto gets the stats of what he turns into. Okay, so that definitely helps. That definitely helps as far as the potential debate. Even if you want to say, you know, like, oh, well, it would only be temporary, or, you know, it wouldn't be as potent or whatever. The simple fact that he gets the stats, you know, is enough for me to be like, okay, that is still a more worthwhile discussion than if he didn't. So yeah, Kirby versus Ditto, honestly wouldn't mind it. If it happened, you know, again, Kirby versus Rimuru is probably the one I lean more towards, but I also think Rimuru has other, and honestly, I don't even think Kirby versus Rimuru was amazing. Like, it's not one of my most wanted death battles or anything. It's just the one that I personally think right now seems the most interesting. But I know Rimuru versus Naofumi is another one that people like, and I can understand that as well. But thank you for clearing that up. I appreciate it, and thank you for the super chat. So yeah, for the time being, what time is it? Sort of like for about 25, 30 more minutes, we can just hang out, do whatever we want. Probably I'll try to finish my water. Again, I have Boomstick here. Like we said, donate to the Raptor Plush Foundation. No, you don't have to. That was an inside joke from one of our members only streams. But yeah, that's fun. Question: will you do Death Battle pitch calls for YouTube members and Discord members? Pitch calls? That's an interesting idea, but that would definitely be like a higher tier membership, I think. Technically, we do have a 4th tier where it doesn't offer any extra perks. It's just, you know, if you want to help out a little bit more, then that option's available to you. So maybe, I guess, if I really wanted to add perks onto that level and I felt like doing pitch calls, I could. But the thing is, YouTube already takes up so much of my time that I feel like if I were to schedule pitch calls, that would be very difficult, and it would just take up even more of my time. And like, I still need, you know, my time to find a job and to do all the other things I need to do in my life that aren't YouTube related, right? So that is definitely, I think, like a very obvious next step as far as a perk I could offer. But for the moment, I'm gonna say no. I'm probably not planning on doing that just yet. And plus, the pitch call, like, the Ballot Banter, I can understand why there would be people that would want that, and that's why I have it as a perk. But a pitch call, like, it's still just me, right? Like, I don't work for Death Battle. Like, you'd be pitching it to me, but it's not like I'd be telling Death Battle what... unless, I guess, maybe it'd be the kind of thing where, like, I record it and put it on my channel, which I guess would then be, like, more videos I could make. But for the time being, I'm going to say no, I'm not planning on that. But potentially, it could happen at some point, I guess. Hank versus V1. Okay. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking about. Yeah. Thank you, guys. more Raptor appearances when? What do you mean more appearances? Like, do you mean like just more streams? We do these streams every month. Next month, we're going to be doing something that's not Ballot Banter related. Right now, my idea for that is just more tier lists. We did a tier list stream last year, and I feel like maybe if we could revisit that, maybe do an update for the Death Battle versus matchup review tier list, that'd be great. That's something I would definitely want to do. And maybe some other tier lists that I can find and do live on stream. Unless people have other ideas for something we can do, but that's my running thought for what we'll do next month. But we'll see. You know, we still got to come up with more stream ideas. Thank you guys so much for the super chats. Oh, I love you guys. Thank you, Santiago. Randy Cunningham versus Ladybug was one of my favorite matchups. With Ladybug having new seasons became too powerful for him. So I think Giorno Giovanna is good for Ladybug. Oh, I don't know if you misspelled something or if that's just a character. I don't know. But Giorno Giovanna, it's good for Ladybug. European teenagers with creation theme powers and are super strategical. Yeah, I've seen that one thrown around before. I definitely like Ladybug versus Randy more than like Ladybug versus Spider-Man at this point. And unfortunately, it is largely for debate reasons. But I understand the sentiment that maybe she's also gotten a little too strong for Randy. I know that. But yeah, like Ladybug is basically just French Spider-Man, right? Like, so that's kind of where I feel like a lot of our minds went in terms of getting a Ladybug matchup. But yeah, Ladybug versus Giorno I've seen a few times. I don't know if I'd be the most hyped for that necessarily. I feel like Joker versus Giorno was the one that we really needed for Giorno, right? But I understand that opinion. I understand that matchup. And Ranger Forever, thank you again. Speaking of recent media, thoughts on Amazing Digital Circus finale and Toy Story 5? Both are great, but no more Toy Story movies and no more Toy Story movies Pixar. Yeah, Toy Story should have stopped at 3. I've seen Toy Story 4, and the thing is, Toy Story 4 is a good movie. I might even go so far to say that as far as like a technical level, it is a great movie. But it's just the fact that it undoes the very solid conclusion, like what was very clearly intended to be the conclusion of Toy Story 3. You know, and then Toy Story 5 kind of undoes the conclusion of Toy Story 4. And even though I do think Toy Story 3 is the better conclusion than the one in Toy Story 4, I'm not really upset that it was that one specifically that got undone. It's the fact that it was the first conclusion that got undone. Don't keep undoing these conclusions. Don't even start with it, you know? Like, if Toy Story 3 had Toy Story 4's ending, but then they had Toy Story 4 with Toy Story 3's ending, even if I liked that ending more, I still would be saying the same thing. Because you're just undoing the ending when that is the point of your movie. So I'm going to see Toy Story 5. I'm probably going to enjoy it. It seems like it's getting decent reviews. But you know, yeah, that definitely does annoy me. And as far as the Amazing Digital Circus finale, I haven't seen it. But that is another thing, like kind of like the villainous stuff where I could put it on my list to see. So thank you so much for the super chats. You guys are great. Would you want to do a pitch call with Ben and Chad yourself? Dark Willow versus White Violin is calling. Yeah, if I was to do a pitched matchup for Ben and Chad, it would probably be that matchup. I would probably do that one. But the thing is, they are very expensive. And again, I could use that whole girl math idea thing of like, you guys are giving me so many super chats that I can just use that to fund it, right? Like, I could theoretically do that. But I am Canadian, which means that it's technically more expensive for me because the Canadian dollar is valued lower. And I just don't know if I want to spend that much money, you know? I would really like to post it on my channel. That'd be something great to post, but I don't know. Like, and they also sold out like even quicker than I know. Like, even when I had the idea of like, oh, do I want to do it? I noticed that like, oh no, they're just sold out. Like, they go by so fast, right? So in a perfect world, yes, but because, you know, the chance to do so only comes like once in a blue moon, and because of how expensive they are, I'm not committing to it. I'm not saying I'm definitely going to, but I would love to. I would absolutely love to. And Dark Willow versus White Violin is probably the one that I would do. More Raptor. So if you're just saying you want more of me, I don't know, here I am, hi, you can talk to me all you want here for like 20 more minutes. But as far as like more videos, like the general idea is to do like one video a week more so. Or I guess it's more so 4 or 5 videos every month. Like you have your stream, the prediction, the reaction, or I guess going in order, the stream, the reaction, the prediction, and then 1 or 2 more videos posted before the next stream. Because like the streams are monthly, the predictions are monthly, the reactions are monthly. That's usually the framework that I have. So yeah, trying my best. Thank you, Santiago, again for the super chat. If Doom Guy will come back one day with a total new matchup that gives a true challenge to him, who could it be? A Warhammer 40k Space Marine, Kratos, or Spawn? I've seen Kratos versus Doomslayer a little bit. I think like, you know, Kratos versus Asura was obviously the more appropriate matchup for Kratos. But I've seen that one thrown around. I feel like if Doom Guy is gonna have to come back, like, you can't give him another matchup where he obviously destroys the opponent. That's only acceptable because it was a rematch that was voted on by the fans. You know, if that was something Death Battle just chose to do on their own, I probably would have liked the matchup even less. But as far as, yeah, if they're gonna bring Doomslayer back again to give him a real challenge, which I think is something would be nice if they did, yeah, you definitely need like a superstar, because Doomslayer's highest scaling is buck wild. So you definitely need a really strong opponent like that for sure. Yeah, I don't know exactly who I'd want him to fight. I'll say Kratos for now, but that's honestly just the default answer. I feel like there's got to be better for him out there. I would pitch Yang versus Vi if I was willing to spend that much. Yeah, exactly. It's always if you're willing to spend that much. Yang versus Vi is pretty damn cool. I do like Yang versus Vi. At this point, like how I was saying that, like, for both Yang and Tifa, like, I've heard Vi for Yang and I've heard Mokgothu for Tifa. I think it's fair for me to say that, like, Mokgothu currently is my preferred for Tifa, and Vi is currently my preferred for Yang. I do like that one quite a bit. I definitely want to see another Yu-Gi-Oh matchup, honestly. It took him far too long just to get the first one. I hope we don't have to wait 10 plus years for a second. Yeah, that'd be nice. We are actually going to be reviewing a Yu-Gi-Oh matchup in the next versus matchup review video. So if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on that one, you can tune in a few weeks. That one is Ryuji Sakamoto versus Joey Wheeler. So very interesting idea, obviously. But if you want to hear my thoughts on that, you can tune in a few weeks. And obviously there's Ben 10 versus Jade and Yuki. Probably the most likely chance for Yu-Gi-Oh to get another episode pretty soon. What's your wish list and predictions, animation quality and moments, analysis, etc. for Superboy Prime versus Sentry? Whether Superboy Prime resists it or not, I would really like to see some mental meddling that comes from the Void. I feel like you have to get that in there. Definitely some like reality shattering, maybe like changing of the backgrounds, you know, just changing reality nearly like across like the entire like last third of the fight or something. That would be really cool. Some cool dialogue. I would really like there to be like some really like hard-hitting dialogue about like how broken these characters feel. But of course they got to incorporate that. They got to incorporate that more organically into the animation. And as far as the analyses, yeah, just like going over things that we don't know, you know, like going over not only their strongest stuff, but like their weirdest stuff that a lot of people aren't aware of that they've done. That's always one of my most wanted things for comic matchups, but I feel like for this one especially, it's like, let us know the weird stuff that Sentry and Prime have gone through, because like I feel like we should get that. But if Kratos has a third episode, we could resurrect the old school Kratos versus Dante. They're a similar kind of level and have a lot of abilities and a huge arsenal. Yeah, thank you, Santiago, for the super chat. I liked Kratos versus Dante more than I did. more than I do now. I do agree that like, or I do recognize that Asura makes more sense for Kratos just from like a sheer matchmaking perspective, right? Dante versus Kratos, I think really I just wanted that one because I wanted Dante to come back. Now that we have Dante versus Clive, we have like a new Dante episode and a new Kratos episode. I don't really think we need Kratos versus Dante, but I guess maybe if it gets like pushed out like a long ways away and then they do it, I guess. But I definitely don't think Kratos versus Dante is as needed or as warranted as like before we knew that Kratos versus Asura was coming and Dante versus Clive now. I've heard of Ryuji versus Joey primarily from Zero. I like it. Well, yep, you'll see how I feel later. Actually, if White Violin got on, given the difference in the character's gender across the comics and the show, would they be repped as Vanya or Victor? That is a very difficult question. You are asking the right question, but you are asking a very hard question. Because in the original source material, it's just Vanya. That's the original, right? In a sense, you feel like you want to respect that, but you also want to respect Elliot Page's transition, and that went from Vanya to Victor because of Elliot Page, right? So realistically, you're combining both of the characters together, but then do you still call the character Victor because the original character was never Victor? Or, but then if you say Vanya instead, then it kind of feels like you're spitting in the face of Elliot Page. So that is a very difficult thing that I don't know how Death Battle would work that in. Again, I think that the title, I would prefer Dark Willow versus White Violin, just like for titling reasons. You don't even need to worry about that. But for how they would address her throughout, or address them, him, again, I don't know how to talk about the character, because when I said her, I was like, my mind jumped to the comic. But of course, that's not how it works in the show. But like, when we combine the two versions, do we just say them? But then do we still say Vanya or Victor? I think they would probably go more Victor, because I feel like they just don't want to run the risk of sounding in a certain way that they don't want to sound, right? But I don't know. There's a very difficult question for sure. Santiago, thank you. People say that Kirby is the strongest character ever, but we never saw his full potential in the show. I think a good matchup for him is Patrick Starfish. His really bizarre and vulnerable Toon Force could give a challenge. Yeah, another example where it's like, you see the matchup, you understand why they're being paired together, the connections are kind of non-existent, but you know, with Kirby, it's hard to find a matchup with like really strong connections, right? So I totally get that as well. Yeah, Kirby is not the strongest character ever. Like anyone who's trying to say like anyone can solo fiction, like they're kind of just speaking out of their ass, if you ask me. But because like you're trying to say you're an expert on all of fiction, like really? Like you're trying to say that just because they're your favorite character, they would always win against everybody? Like, come on now. That kind of just takes away the fun of the versus debating for me. Especially if that was true, that there was a character who could solo all of fiction. Like, are you kidding me? Why are we even putting them in versus debates if that was true? Why is this interesting? I've always seen this community as more of an outlet to have conversations that are interesting rather than to just shill your favorite character and share how unbeatable they are. Like, to me, that's just not interesting, right? If that's your reason for being here. Sorry if I'm the only one who thinks that. Like I said, good water. To follow up one of my previous comments, Mario vs. Kirby is for the Nintendo fans. Yeah. Goku vs. Sonic is for the hype moment boys, and Superman vs. Optimus are for the childhood hero vibes. Yeah. The thing is, like, a matchup is always going to appeal to a certain demographic, regardless of what it is, right? And Death Battle choosing their matchups, we have to keep in mind that there are different ways that they could, there are different ways that they could decide on the matchups that they choose. So, yeah, it's whatever they think would work best for them and work best for the audience, I guess. So yeah, definitely. Like I said, I think Superman versus Optimus would be cool, but I think it needs to be like a specific version of Superman versus a specific version of Optimus. which I normally wouldn't say. I'd be like, why are we arbitrarily just limiting them to like this version of the character? But I think Superman versus Optimus is a unique case where like it is a very cool comparison of two very awesome characters, but the debate is honestly just kind of worthless. I'm sorry. Water. Yep. Raptor as Lord Death from Soul Eater. What do you mean as Lord Death? Like, I don't know. That's funny. Are you going to give Black Widow Apocalypse a shot? I might, yeah. That's another thing I could put on my list. The thing about being in this community is that there's so many things that, like, I get introduced to so many series that, like, I kind of have, like, a list for, like, that I could eventually get to at some point. But, of course, I can't promise anything on stream because if I don't get to it or if I get to something else first, then it's like, well, then I've just disappointed people who are interested in hearing my thoughts on it. So I can't confirm anything, but that would be another one on my list, just because I've seen Izzy so much in this community now. Although then again, sometimes it can have the opposite effect, where I've seen Uzi so much in this community with so many matchups, that it's, if anything, it's kind of turned me away from Murder Drones. And I say that only a little sarcastically. Santiago, thank you again for the super chat. Both are small pink round critters that love to eat, I think that is, and they are really stronger. They are stronger than they look. Also, they're both related with stars. Patrick should scale to SpongeBob and have stuff from all media. Yeah, there's always some connection. When I say that they don't have a lot of connections, I just mean they don't have like a lot of hard-hitting connections. Ideally, I think Kirby's best matchup comes from something where you can compare their character on a deeper level to Kirby as opposed to like the surface level stuff. But from what I've seen, I just haven't seen a lot of matchups like that. Let me heart that. Thank you, Alex Chen, for the $10. Glad to see you again. I strongly agree with your take regarding those who claim that a certain character's soul is all a fiction. There's no such thing as a single definitive strongest character, since it's all subjective. Yeah, there's also that too, that, you know, I could say that like, oh, well, this is the strongest character in my favorite universe, therefore they solo fiction. Like, what are you gonna do to debate that, right? You know, like it's all subjective. It's all just, we're all just trying to analyze. Well, I like to try to analyze things in the way that makes the most sense to me. I feel like there are some people who do try to analyze things in ways that benefit their favorite characters, which I just don't get. But, you know, that's the way I like to do it. And even that is still subjective. What I think is the most logical way to debate something or analyze something might be very different from you. This is all made up. This is all subjective. Nothing, basically, not to say that some of the subjective opinions can't be backed up with some objective things, like how something could be calculated, right? Like a certain feat, like, or if something is told through the lore, like that's an objective statement about how some things work. But like trying to compare different characters from different series, like, it doesn't take very long for like everything to just become subjective at that point. Even if you think you have a better basis for what you believe in than maybe somebody else. Do you think hacks and speed will grant you the win? In some instances, yes, I do, because if you're so fast that you can't be hit, and if your hacks are so good that you might as well have the strength advantage, like you can basically take them out in one hit, then yeah, that does seem like a really good way to win. I think you need to be a heck of a lot faster, and your hacks needs to be good enough that it basically means that durability doesn't matter, or you can end the fight in you can end the fight in a very easy way, in a very simple, easy way. I think that needs to be present. I don't think it just means like if you have the speed and hacks advantages, it automatically means you win. Because if you only have those advantages by like the smallest amounts, but then someone is way stronger and way more durable and has the proper resistances, then no, that character will just beat you. But if you're like way faster and have way more hacks that durability doesn't matter, yeah, I think that's like the perfect combination to just not get hit and immediately win. Do you prefer Rainbow Dash matchup? I don't know. Part of me wants to say Sonic, but like I kind of want Sonic to fight either like... I want Mario versus Sonic 3. I would really appreciate that, you know? Or maybe even Goku versus Sonic in some form, maybe, you know? I don't think we need all of the Sonic versus Dragon Ball matchups that exist. You know, I don't think all of them need to be made into episodes, but I still recognize that could be fun. The hype could kind of just carry it. And you can have different versions of the characters, right? That can make things more interesting. So I don't really know. I guess right now all I can say then is that it probably wouldn't be Sonic, but I don't have another character in mind for it just yet. Can you open the Ballot Banter channel after the stream? I don't know if it's going to be right after the stream, but I will either do it at some point later today or like early tomorrow. Yeah, so again, for anyone who's a member and has joined the Discord and wants to submit, they're not open right now because I can't open it right now, but they will be opened at some point very soon. So don't worry about that. I'm not going to forget about it or anything. We will make sure that it gets open for the people who can submit. Again, join button down below, tier 2 and above. You can submit for future Ballot Banters if you want to do that. Please make sure you do that. But of course, if you're just fine listening, that's great too. And also, again, thank you, Kinjorix, so much for the 5 gifted memberships. I think this puts us over 50 members, at least over 60 members, at least temporarily, which is really awesome. So thank you so much for that. And yeah, it's a great way to support the channel. If you want to just support a little bit more, then yeah, become a member. Being more members does help, but of course it's not a requirement. It's just a little extra stuff on the channel now for the people who want to be members. What are your thoughts on the Buffy revival show being canceled? I was so disappointed when I found out. I was really looking forward to it. It goes both ways because on the one hand, I don't think it would have been better than the original series. Again, kind of like with the iCarly reboot, I kind of feel like I might get my expectations up a little too high just from what I'm expecting, you know, from the previous episode. So I feel like it wouldn't have been as good, but damn, I wanted it. But also, we've had a number of Buffy actors pass away lately. Like there was, oh god, why can't I remember her name right now? But the actress who played Dawn, she passed away, you know, semi-recently. And then Nicholas Brendan, who played Xander, he passed away even more recently. And then Anthony Stewart Head, who played Giles, he passed away like really recently. You know, so... And not to say that the show could have only worked with like the previous actors on it, like that's not what I'm saying at all, but that is a little disappointing that, you know, and very tragic of course, but also just disappointing that like, you know, these actors are being taken from us like this, you know, and so close together. Damn it, why can't I remember Dawn's actress's name? This is a total brain fart, but you know, yes, I am disappointed that the Buffy revival is canceled. I would have really liked to see it, and rest in peace to all those amazing actors. Now that Baki has a similar level of popularity like JoJo's thanks to the memes, I think they might make an episode with Baki characters. Yes, I do. Probably Yujiro and Baki will get one. I like Yujiro versus Rao, I think, Fist of the North Star. Yeah, that's a fun one. I've seen like Yujiro versus like Akuma. I've seen both Heihachi and Kazuya, actually, I've seen. Obviously, there's Yujiro versus Sporticus that a lot of people throw around. And even like Homelander, which is, I don't know, that one's kind of weird to me. But a lot of different matchups for Yujiro. And Baki, I feel like, has a really obvious one that I'm just not thinking of right now. But yeah, characters from that series can definitely get something. Let me give that a heart. Thank you again so much for all your super chats. Again, I know that for your currency, each of those super chats are just a matter of cents. So for everyone thinking like, he's donating like $100, $200 per donation. No, he's not. But I still appreciate the donations nonetheless. I appreciate it immensely. Do you think Astro Boy should get a run back? Kind of. I just don't know who he would fight. Like, I feel like Robot Boy, for instance, is better against Jenny Wakeman. I feel like a lot of these like Robot Kid characters already have very obvious matchups that Astro Boy would kind of just be intruding on. Someone from Murder Drones? Do we have Uzi versus Astro Boy? Do I hear Uzi versus Astro Boy? Sorry. I would like to see Astro get another one, yeah. But I just don't know who against. And then we have this fucking thing. Yes, thank you, Sack. Glad you could get in on the tail end of this. Michelle Tradenberg, yes, thank you. That was it. For some reason I couldn't remember that, but thank you so much. Yes, rest in peace to her as well. What do you think of Sukuna versus Yoru? I think I'd prefer to have Sukuna fight someone else as opposed to just having another Jujutsu Kaisen versus Chainsaw Man episode. But if they went with it, I guess it's fine. But I see it as kind of like the Kaguya versus Keaobaka, you know, of Jujutsu Kaisen versus Chainsaw Man. Not as bad of a matchup as that, but kind of like, why? We could probably find something better. Random matchup, Jetstream Sam versus Adam Taurus thoughts. Not a lot of in-depth thoughts, but something with Jetstream Sam would be cool. That'd be a very funny clash of personalities there. Just for that, that sounds really fun. For Rainbow Dash, I'll go with Buttercup from Powerpuff Girls. Tough, competitive tomboys that form part of a group of hero girls from Kid Show. They're both really fast and fly and are really strong. Yeah, being really fast and really strong is a connection now. No, that's actually a decent one. That's fine. If we really need to find something for Rainbow Dash, I think, yeah, the Powerpuff Girls is a really easy place that you can look for a matchup like that. Again, just similar demographics, similar tones, similar vibes. Yeah, of course. Baki's opponent is Oma from Kengan Ashura. So obvious they even did a crossover. Yes, now that you say it, that is definitely the one I was thinking of. I couldn't pull it out of my ass yet. What's your top 50 most wanted matchups now because Yuji versus Denji has happened? That is something, again, if we do tier lists for the next stream, which is my current idea, and when we do more of the, when we update the versus matchup review matchups on that tier list, that's probably when I can give at least somewhat of an update to the top 50, because some of the stuff on there might move up to the top 50, right? So I'll at least give somewhat of an answer to that. But like I've said, I'm not trying to give like really concrete updates to the top 50, because I feel like I'm just gonna get sucked into, not only sucked into like having to update it all the time, but also like, what do I then feel like I can't ever change it? Like that, like I don't really want to lock myself into anything there, right? Because like I could change a lot of things. There's probably some things that have changed drastically from the top 50, but I don't feel like updating everybody every time that happens, you know? I'm curious on why you don't really like 5 versus Nightcrawler. There was one aspect for why I didn't like it because of Nightcrawler's survivability, which does, like his ridiculous survivability. Like 5 had really no way of even like hoping to kill him, which doesn't seem to be the case in the comics anymore, so in that sense that is better, but I still don't really think the connections hold up very well. I think a lot of them are very stretched. Number 5 in the original source material, his power isn't even teleporting. That's strictly a Netflix show change, so that already I don't really love that connection regarding it. And yeah, I think like the whole thing about like both of them coming from like a school of sorts, like I feel like maybe some X-Men versus Umbrella Academy thing could work, but I don't know. I just don't really love it for that matchup. I feel like there was, oh yeah, and also just the Umbrella Academy season finale, like, or the series finale, really soured me. That whole final season really soured me from getting excited for that matchup at all, really. I do love both of the characters. Well, again, with number 5, he did some weird stuff in the final season. But you know, I do still respect both of the characters. I really love Nightcrawler. I really want him on Death Battle. But I don't know. To me, I just don't see that as his matchup. I think that there's way better stuff for him. Okay, we're definitely going to have to wrap up pretty soon. I just realized we are over time. I can probably go for like 5 more minutes. So if there's anybody who wants to... Well, like, again, we have one more super chat, so if you really want to send your messages in, get them in quick. Also, both Friendship is Magic and some Powerpuff Girls series were both made by Lauren Faust. Faust, I think is how you pronounce that. That's really cool, yeah. Creator-based connections, while I don't really think it necessarily adds to the quality of a matchup, it is always cool to see. Do you have any preferred for Nightcrawler or 5? For Nightcrawler, tentatively, I'm going to say Nico D'Angelo from Percy Jackson, and 5... I think I heard something interesting for 5. Was it like Oscar from Ruby or something? It was something where it was like 2 adults in kids' bodies who are trying to prevent the apocalypse. Like that was the core point of it. I remember that. I don't remember if that was the character though. And I haven't even really looked into it that much, but that's one, like that's the first one I think of when I think of a 5 matchup. But I don't know if that really holds up too well, because I just haven't looked into it very much. Indiana Jones versus Jack Sparrow. Yeah, that's a cool one. Holy shit, we are not slowing down. Santiago, thank you. Not slowing down with the super chats at all. ARS is for arsenic. Not really, just kidding. Arsenic is more expensive than ARS. Yeah, I know it's like a peso. Is it Argentinian peso? Or is it something else? Either way, I appreciate it nonetheless. Regardless of how you donate or the value that you donate, literally regardless. Like the fact that you're super chatting is amazing to me anyway. So I appreciate it always. Do you have a favorite Funko Pop? Oh my god, I have so many favorite Funko Pops. I got a Jet the Hawk one that I really like recently. I also got a Sonic and Flash, you know, like the DC Comics crossover, like Sonic dressed up as the Flash. I got that one in the other room. I really like that one. My Omni-Man one I really like. God, there's so many that I like. I don't have a favorite one. I don't have one that I love above all else. I have like over 100 of them, man. I have so many. But there are a lot that I really, really like. I like my Shenron. Oh, you know what? My Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. That is a contender for one of my favorites as well. I really like that one. Like the GT Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. That one's really cool. Heard of Kurt Wagner versus Rin Okumura? Not really. I've heard of Rin versus Inuyasha more so, actually. I haven't heard of that one before. Okay, I think this is probably where we're gonna wrap it up. Sorry for everyone who I wasn't able to catch questions for again. I don't like turning on slow mode because that just gets people annoyed usually, and people tend to drop off. Obviously, the trade-off there is that I can't see everybody's suggestions, but to everyone who super chatted, of course, you guys are the best. Thank you so much. And again, to all the members who submitted for Ballot Banter, or just all the members in general, thank you so much for your support and for making this video possible. And if you enjoyed this stream, be sure to give it a like. Make sure to give this video a like. Comment your comments down below. Subscribe if you could too, if you're not subscribed. But either way, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. One last super chat from Santiago. What about an author matchup like ToriBot versus Stan Lee or Matt Groening? If you mean like all the things that those characters have created, maybe. But if you mean just like literally them, again, it depends on like if they have like fictional stuff to go off of. But I don't know if I want to put like Stan Lee himself in a... Well, it depends. I'm not really sure. I haven't really thought about that much. They need to have enough fictional material to really work though. Okay, yeah, thank you guys so much for joining. I appreciate it. And that is it for now. Have a good night.